November meeting of the Historic Conservation Commission. I'm Gary Lader, Chair of the HCC. I would like to introduce the Commission. We have Jeffrey Long, our Historical Officer and Registered Architect to my left. Chaz Patrick to my right, business owner. Seth Cornish, real estate broker. Ken Lausch, a resident of the Mount Airy District. Craig Evans, who is a resident. Roger Hudak, who is a resident. And Mike Simonson, our Chief Building Inspector. It is the purpose and intent of the City of Bethlehem to promote, enhance, and preserve historic resources and traditional community character for the education, cultural, economic, and general welfare of the public through the preservation, protection, and regulation of buildings and areas of historic interest or importance within the city, which have been determined to be of local, state, or national significance. The way the meeting will unfold is the applicants will be taken in order. After identifying the project address and the presenters, our historic officer will provide background on the building and any recommendations. At that time, the applicant will present their project and plan. The board will then address the project, and there will be time for public comment. And ultimately, a motion will be created to approve as presented, approve with modifications, table with clear recommendations, or deny the project with reasons for the denial, and changes or improvements which would result in a positive recommendation. Anyone from the public who wishes to speak, there is a 3-minute time limit, and the comments should be limited to attributes of the building only. The HCC is a recommending board, and the results of our meeting will be presented to the City Council, and their vote will be binding. Please do not forget to secure your permit from the permit office on the first floor of City Hall before you begin your project. Above all, I remind everyone to conduct themselves in a civil manner and always use a civil tone. The Commission is here to help you with your project. We are a group of volunteers who are dedicated to historic preservation and restoration of older buildings in Bethlehem and beyond. If any Commission members have a conflict of interest with any of the applications on tonight's agenda, please come forth at this time.
Hey, Gary, I'd like to recuse myself from item 3.
Okay, item 3. Okay, so Ken Lausch will recuse himself from item number 3. I am going to recuse myself from item number 4 and item number 6. Okay. There are several methods to expedite our monthly meetings. There will be a 45-minute time limit on new proposals for large projects. Also, upon the second visit to the Commission for large-scale projects, the following will be required: architectural plan with lot lines, setbacks, define architectural features, all measurements, including the amount of floors, foundations, walls, parapets, window sizes, and the like. Also, a complete set of elevations of the building with streetscape drawings showing the new structure in context with surrounding buildings. So with that, we will go to our first agenda item, which is 125 East 3rd Street. Is the representatives for that project here? Please come up front to this desk over here and announce your name.
It works. Christine Nussler.
Thank you.
Chad Jarrah.
Can
Okay,
you
yeah.
both please sign in too as well?
Yes, please sign in.
(125 East 3rd Street). The building description, period, style, and defining features. This structure is an attached 3-story mixed-use masonry building with a flat roof dating from circa 1910. Brick pilasters support a decorative upper cornice with ornamental end brackets. The structure is classical revival in style with primary facade materials of light brown brick and cast stone. The original storefront was altered during the late 20th century with beige face brick, while the area above that extends to the second floor windowsills recently received unfinished T111 vertical plywood siding. The aluminum framed double entrance doors centered within the storefront are flanked on one side by a display window and on the other side by a recessed paneled entrance door that leads to the residential units above. It is proposed to install new casement-style window replacements that are much larger than the existing upper-level double-hung windows. Guideline citations used for my assessment include the Secretary of Interior Standard Number 9 that concerns new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction, as well as the Bethlehem ordinance that was read by Mr. Later at the beginning of tonight's meeting. My evaluation and recommendations. The Certificate of Appropriateness application indicates the intent to replace the existing double-hung windows at the second and third floor levels with larger casement windows to satisfy emergency egress requirements for upper-level apartment units. The proposed window replacements are Anderson E-Series aluminum-clad casements or comparable, with clear glass and exterior applied muntins as simulated divided lights. Casements at the second floor level measure 54 inches tall by 28 inches wide and include 2 pairs, one for each interior room, with a heavy mullion to fill the gap between. Painted medium density overlay or so-called MDO panels with trim infill above casements imply original decorative transom. Casements at the third floor level measure 60 inches tall by 28 inches wide and also include 2 pairs, one for each interior room, with a heavy mullion to fill the gap between. The proposed casement windows are appropriate as presented with the following clarifications. Confirm the proposed factory applied exterior color finish. So as a reminder, HCC doesn't assess paint color, but when it's a finish applied by the manufacturer, which I'm assuming this is, we like to have that for the record. And finally, identify the proposed material and color, if the color is factory applied, of the mullions between the casements. Those were the only 2 things I couldn't assess from the provided application.
Okay. All right, thank you. Please clarify for us Jeffrey's items.
And I'll sort of jump in with a little bit of history on the building. The building changed before, the windows changed before the historic district is in place. And I do remember them to some extent. So there were stained glass panels above the second floor level. And I recalled them as casement windows. Jeffrey found actually an image that there may have been a double hung large fixed piece of glass in the middle. But the current renovations going on do require a wall at the center of the large opening, masonry opening. And so we're trying to develop something here that would recall what was there, but it's not exactly. And I mean, in the future, Mr. Jarrah would like to renovate the lower level, but at this time is not ready to review that. And I think I'll let you talk about color.
Yeah, were you referring to the color of the actual exterior of the window?
Yeah.
There was 2 choices with Anderson, or there's a few, but the 2 that I thought were best were dark bronze or black. I spoke with Christine about what she thought. She thought both are good options. I can choose one. I was waiting for her to finish the bottom portion so we could kind of coordinate. But if a choice needs to be made, I'm fine with either of those.
The material between the large mull, I'm not sure whether that would end up with the MDO type of panel construction or if it would be an aluminum piece, but I'm thinking it's going to be more the first option, part of that panel detail.
So are you waiting for approval of color until you finish the bottom?
I mean, I could really, I don't have much of a preference because I thought both of them were nice options. If you guys need to know now, I'll pick one of them and Christine can go off of that.
I guess I just need to ask, but is reactivating that arch with glass, why is that not being considered?
And part of it's the level of the ceiling proposed in the interior, and you know, stained glass would be a little bit difficult cost-wise. So those are the main reasons.
Is there,
Just to add to that, I just don't think clear glass is going to look right there.
okay,
You know, it's in terms of the historic precedent, what was there before.
yeah. Is there a possibility for other kinds of glass that can be done through the manufacturer and adjusting the ceiling around it? Is that something that would be considered?
Mostly it was just cost considerations. I mean, I know that that's not where you make your decisions. It seemed that a paneled detail there would not be inappropriate.
Any other questions from commission members on this?
Just a comment, I think that if there were to be a subsequent change in that arch or transom area, these panels wouldn't preclude that from happening. It would simply be an application to us. So I don't think that that's an issue that we have to really wrestle with.
Okay.
And as far as the colors for the factory paint colors, I think we could approve both of them and the choice be made when the time is appropriate for the applicant to make that decision based on the subsequent design that's going on downstairs. But I think we could certainly approve without limiting or forcing a decision tonight.
Well, that sounds like a motion, Craig.
I so move.
Second.
I'm sorry. Okay, I move that we recommend a certificate of appropriateness for 125 East 3rd Street in line with the City of Bethlehem historic guidelines and the Secretary of Interior standards to replace the windows as proposed with the option of color choice to be made by the applicant when the lower level design is completed. That's it. And to include that the center mullion be an MDO type material with the same color finish as the window structure.
I'll second that.
Okay, thank you. Let's put it to a vote. Oh, yes? Thank you. Any comments from the public on this? Okay, right, if not, let's put it to a vote. Craig Evans,
Aye.
Seth Cornish,
Aye.
Roger Hudak.
Aye.
Ed Lausch.
Aye.
I vote aye. Mike
Aye.
and Chaz?
Aye.
Okay, so motion carries unanimously.
Can we just add that when a color choice is made, that you let us know what the color is so we can put it into the record for the later submission for the bottom floor?
Absolutely.
Part of the problem we're all facing right now is the lead time, which is
Understood. Just so
why we're here 2 times.
we can come back the second time, we already know what color you're using.
Thank you.
All right, you're welcome. Okay, we are up to item number 2 for 13 West 3rd Street. And please announce yourself and sign in.
Alex Torres.
George Leudis.
Thank you for joining us tonight.
Thirteen West 3rd Street. The building description, period, style, and defining features. This structure is a 2 1/2 story, 3-bay, painted brick masonry building. It was originally constructed in circa 1880 as a side gable residence with multi-light window sash and is late Victorian in style. commercial front addition with Italianate influences was completed in circa 1900 and includes a corbelled brick and ornate projecting upper cornice along with a flat roof. Storefront was altered and expanded during the mid-20th century and includes aluminum frame entrance doors and windows shaded by candy stripe awnings with scallop detailing on the front valance flaps. It is proposed to paint the exterior walls and trim to replace the existing front awning and to replace the existing signage to reflect a new corporate logo. Citations I used for my assessment include the Secretary of Interior standards concerning new construction or additions that I referenced previously, the Bethlehem ordinance that Mr. Later referenced at the beginning of the meeting, as well as the specific guidelines for the commission for signage and awnings. My evaluation recommendations. The certificate of appropriateness application indicates the intended exterior renovations in tandem with interior improvements, quote, to celebrate Lehigh Pizza's history and reestablish its prominent legacy on the South Side, while also showcasing the future of the business, end quote. Based upon the Secretary of Interior standards and relevant design guidelines, HCC does not consider painted masonry appropriate. However, the existing masonry in this case is already painted, so the proposal is considered appropriate maintenance of the current condition. Similarly, painting of various trim is considered appropriate maintenance, noting HCC does not assess paint color palettes. The proposal to remove the existing awnings across the front facade as well as at both side facades and replace with a single awning measuring approximately 60 inches wide, installed at the recessed entrance with a front valance flap and no exposed support rods, to include Sombrella canvas-like vinyl woven fabric in a Dubonnet tweed, that's the color that's provided, it's kind of a dark red, is appropriate with the following clarification. The sides of the awning should be open. It seems based on the submittal that the indication is the sides appear closed. HCC regulations request awning have open sides. The proposal to replace the existing signage to reflect a new corporate logo involves two different sign locations. The existing rectangular blade sign at the southwest corner is to be replaced with a new round sign, 3 feet in diameter at the similar upper floor level location. The design of the new sign includes Lehigh in all uppercase serif lettering, centered vertically and horizontally within the circle, followed by pizza, also in all uppercase serif lettering, along with a Bethlehem star detail above. Integrated within 2 concentric circles at the outer perimeter is the slogan, "The Valley's Favorite Pizza," at the top of the sign, and "Established 1975" at the bottom of the sign. Both of those are in smaller, all uppercase sans serif lettering. Signage background is pink in color, while the lettering and details are dark red in color. The proposed replacement blade sign is appropriate with the following clarifications. Nowhere could I find the material of the intended sign. We usually ask, so it goes in the motion, what material they plan to use. We prefer something that has longevity to it. We have the diameter, 3 feet, so 36 inches. We also need the thickness of the sign backer. We also are interested in how the graphics are applied to the sign. Are they painted onto it? Is it a vinyl applique? We don't allow for routing out graphics and lettering, so it needs to be either surface mounted. It could be cutouts that are applied to the sign backer, and we recommend, if so, the thickness maximum 1 inch. So if it has dimension to it, just maximum 1 inch. Also, with the provided drawing, it seems to just be hanging in the air. The existing sign has 2 brackets, so we need to understand how you intend to mount the brackets. We recommend a decorative scroll hanging bracket. Our guidelines show those kind of scrolls, and you see them throughout the district. So you currently have just a very simple bar angle with a round sign that gets a bit tricky. So we're very interested in how you intend to hang a round sign. And then finally, the existing sign is currently illuminated, but I couldn't tell any notation about if the new sign, the blade sign, should be illuminated. If so, we need to understand the details of that. The existing sign at the east gable, which currently consists of various channel letters with integrated neon tubes, along with the iconic pizza logo, is to be replaced with a new round sign that measures 8 feet in diameter, centered vertically and horizontally within the upper east gable. The design of the new sign repeats the details of the proposed blade sign, but is proportionally larger. Illumination is to be accomplished by, quote, low wattage lighting installed behind the parapet wall, end quote. Proposed replacement sign is appropriate with the following clarifications. Yet again, we're interested in the material and thickness of the sign backer, or if it's painted directly onto the wall. It's hard to tell from the proposal, from the submittal. Similarly, we're interested in how the graphics are to be applied to the backer. The same situation if they're cutouts. If they're three-dimensional, we prefer that they not be more than 1 inch thick. Yet again, we need to understand how you plan to install, and preferably we don't like to see the fasteners, so a system that has hidden fasteners. And then finally, you do mention the illumination. We just need to make sure that all conduits, raceways, and junction boxes that serve illumination are not visible from the building facade. You do have a parapet, so we're assuming you can hide all of that. And if you're using LED lighting, we recommend a color temperature maximum of 3,000 Kelvin. They go up to 5,000, but those are really just too bright white for the district. So with those requests for clarification, that's the conclusion of my assessment.
Okay, thank you very much. So tell us about your project.
Yeah, so my name is Alex Torres, and I'm part of a group of Lehigh students in the audience. And we're working with George Leotis to help redesign Lehigh Pizza. This has been a year-long project, and this is the first phase for approval, looking at the exterior. And then at the end of the year, we're also going to do some interior submittals for permitting. But
Great.
This is our first step.
Great. Would you like to address some of the questions Jeffrey had?
Yes. In terms of the awning, we initially proposed closed sides awning. The purpose being the doorway is an industrial doorway, and we wanted to kind of hide the industrialness of it in addition to the metal awning supports that would be necessary for the awning. However, if it's required to have an open side, we're willing to do that. So we can transition that to open sides in our design.
In all honesty, I would prefer the closed because I think it maintains the, it hides the modern part of the building of the front doorway, and this way accentuating the older part, the nicer, more architectural part. That's why I prefer closed sides. I just think it's going to look nicer.
Sure. And, you know, all I can say about that is it's just a standard in our district to have them open-sided. I noticed that, you know, your existing is closed, but
Right.
yeah, that just happens to be one of our design standards.
Because the existing are closed already, you know, so that's
Mhm.
that's why I don't want to line. I just think it'll
Sure.
it'll hide the kind of gaudy aluminum frame
Mhm.
behind that.
Mhm. Mhm.
But if
Yeah.
we have to go the other way, we
Yeah,
will.
if we have to, we can open up the sides. So that's something that we can change in the design. The other issue was brought up for the signage. So both the blade sign and the large circular sign on the side will be made out of aluminum. From what I've seen in contact with sign manufacturers, it'll be about 3/8 of an inch thick. For the blade sign and for the large one, the paint will be applied. It'll be automobile paint applied directly to the aluminum. That should provide it the longevity necessary. No vinyl cutouts for lettering on that. Blade sign, there currently are 2 gooseneck lighting units for either side of the sign. We intend to keep those and keep that illumination scheme. Let's see. For the large sign, there's an issue. Oh, for the blade sign,
Hanging.
yeah, how it's going to be hanging. We propose a 2 rods coming from the wall to support the blade sign.
Alex, can you back up a little bit to the lighting? And looking at the photograph of the existing conditions, it looks like to me, it looks like they extend out pretty far, and I'm wondering if you're going to need to change those fixtures.
Can you repeat that last part?
Yes, sorry. It looks like you might have to change the existing fixtures because they extend out pretty far and you're really changing the size of the sign. That's something that I think you'll want to look into. But I think if you're saying that, yeah, essentially you're going to light the sign the same way, I think is maybe what you're saying, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, but the other thing I was wondering is, do you have a signage company that you're working with on this?
Yeah, so I've reached out to an Easton-based company called Fast Signs,
Oh, okay,
and
All right.
that's where I've been getting some of the information from.
okay.
And we'll most likely be moving forward with them. If not them, based off of, other
Mhm.
factors, then something in the same area, and a company that can do the whole sign manufacturing, painting,
Okay.
and installation.
So are you saying that the lettering and the graphics will be painted on, or is it really vinyl that's applied to the painted background?
It will be all painted, including lettering and background
Okay,
on the aluminum. And then the aluminum will be fixed to at least for the large sign, will be fixed to the walls using expansion bolts.
okay.
There needs to be some concern about the process of attachment so that those points of attachment are into the mortar rather than into the brick structure.
Yeah, I
So
agree.
that whenever, when and if it's ever changed, that can be remediated without any further damage to the walls.
We have access to the inside of the wall too, and it's not finished, so we could always go through to secure it, from inside with washers
Okay.
and nuts too. So the mounting is not as big of a concern. I think, we should be able to get around all the mounting criteria, or whatever mounting problems we may have.
Any other comments or questions from the commission?
I'm just looking at the sign that's existing in the one picture you have here, and it looks considerably thicker than 3/8 of an inch, the blade sign. So are you gonna fasten those lights to the blade sign? Is that what you're saying?
I believe that it's conduit that kind of goes over that sign,
Mhm.
and then it has a T, and I think it has a box, also electrical box, where the bars come out for the light. So we're just going to modify it to make it as less of I can't think.
Yeah, make it possible for the
Right.
circular sign.
We want to make it look nice, obviously, and we want to.
Yeah.
It's going to be modified. I don't think the existing light is going to, stay. I'm sure we're going to modify it to make it match the new sign.
Yeah, how they're.
Yeah, and I'm sure your sign company's going to be able to help you with
Right.
the lighting on
Yeah.
that too.
Yep.
Overall, it looks like a great proposal and some very nice improvements.
Thank you.
Anybody else on this? Is there anyone from the public who wishes to comment on this project? Okay, well, I'd like to make a motion for the City of Bethlehem City Council to issue a certificate of appropriateness for 13 West 3rd Street, Lehigh Pizza. Based on our design guidelines and Secretary of Interior standards, we recommend that the new proposed awning have open sides to fit with our design guidelines. That the signage being provided will be of aluminum and 3/8 inch thick The applicant is going to work with a sign company to be determined, and they will help them with the lighting. The graphics will be paint applied. If that changes, please let us know. We are also recommending a bracket that is in keeping with similar brackets found in our district. The lighting for the blade sign will be replaced and for something that's more compatible in size and scale. For the larger sign, the lighting will be hidden in the parapet. We recommend that lighting temperature be at 3,000 Kelvin. We don't want any visible conduits. All fasteners should be hidden. And I think that's it. Anybody wish to second that? Okay, thank you. That would be Roger.
Yeah.
Okay. Let's put this to a vote. Craig Evans,
Aye.
Seth Cornish,
Aye.
Roger Hudak,
Aye.
Ken Lausch. I vote aye. Mike Simonson
Aye.
and Chaz Patrick.
Aye.
Okay, motion carries, and thank you.
Thank you very much.
And looking forward to seeing all these improvements.
Thank you.
Okay, our next applicant is for 317, 327 South New Street. Is 317, 327 South New Street here? Okay, maybe they are not here. So this is Jeffrey Quinn and Ralph Palomino. Oh, okay. All right, then we shall go to item number 4, 2430 West 4th Street. And this is one of the projects I'm going to ask Craig to take over as chair.
'24 to 30 West 4th Street. It is proposed to construct a new 6-story mixed-use structure. Guidelines and citations used from my assessment include the Secretary of Interior Standards number 9, referenced in the 2 previous projects concerning new additions, exterior alterations, or related new construction. Bethlehem Ordinance quoted by Mr. Lader at the beginning of tonight's meeting. The Historic Conservation District Design Guidelines concerning new construction. They include, but are not limited to, such issues as size, scale, and proportion, rhythm and patterns, window and door openings, materials and textures, architectural details, shapes and massing, and streetscapes. And then finally, there are specific guidelines for designing of storefronts in the historic district. I also reference those. My evaluation, the effect on the district, and my recommendations. The applicant initially appeared before HCC on March 17, 2014, seeking approval to demolish a 2.5-story mixed-use brick-coated masonry building at 30 West 4th Street, the corner of Vine Street, and replace it with an L-shaped 7-story mixed-use building with a roof terrace, all designed by Howard Culp Architects. The proposed new structure had brick facades, projecting bays with fiber cement siding, corner balconies at the 2nd through 5th floor, residential units, as well as curved corners at the 6th and 7th floor levels. The applicant appeared on the agenda for the HCC meeting on August 18 of the same year, 2014, with a revised design proposal seeking approval of a 12-story mixed-use building. However, meeting minutes indicate the item was subsequently removed from the agenda. The applicant returned during a special HCC meeting on September the 29th, 2014, with yet another revised design proposal seeking approval to demolish the corner structure as well as the nearby 2.5-story Queen Anne mixed-use building at 24 West 4th Street and replace both buildings with a larger 9-story mixed-use building with roof terrace, also designed by Howard Culp Architects. After a comprehensive assessment by the historic officer at the time, presentation by the applicant, discussion involving HCC members followed by public commentary, HCC approved by a motion 4-2, so 5-2, 5 in favor, 2 against, and also against the recommendation of the historic officer, for City Council to issue a certificate of appropriateness to demolish both existing structures and replace them with a 9-story mixed-use building. The demolition approval was conditional upon the applicant providing photographic documentation of the building at 24 West 4th Street prior to demolition, along with removal and preservation of various historical features and elements from that specific property. On the resolution, it states the character-defining elements include windows, masonry units, metal finial, the front door, etc. All that documentation was to be done according to the Pennsylvania Historic and Museum Commission standards. And the resolution that lists all these items was also included in the application we have in front of us today. The replacement structure included 8 full stories and a 9th floor that set back 5 feet from the facade, with a first floor commercial space, residential units on the remaining floors, and a roof terrace. Proposed materials included limestone and glass at the storefront, along with masonry piers and heavy lower cornice delineating a transition between the commercial entry level to the remaining residential floor levels above. Those levels included a mix of brick, glass, and fiber cement panels. The east facade that would be visible above the neighboring structure was required to be modified, so not included in the application, but in moving forward, it would need to be modified to have blind windows and other scaling devices, with all final material selections as well as the facade and cornice details to be reviewed at a subsequent HCC meeting. The current certificate of appropriateness application references the 2 certificates resulting from that meeting and ultimately approved by City Council to demolish the 2 existing structures and replace them with a new 9-story mixed-use building, noting the intent, quote, to modify the architecture and reduce the building height to 6 stories with a restaurant on the first floor. Otherwise, all information contained in the original cases number 5, 15, and 16 remain unchanged, end quote. Thus, the appropriateness of the proposed demolition, as well as the overall size, scale, massing, and proportions of the replacement structure have already been determined by HCC as appropriate and are not part of the current assessment, especially considering the reduction in the overall building height is now reduced to 6 stories. However, the applicants claim that various details previously determined by HCC as appropriate and subsequently approved by Council beyond the height reduction remain unchanged is incorrect, as evidenced by supplemental drawing sheets that are provided by a new project architect called Cidio. The original storefront with limestone, glass, and masonry piers, as well as a heavy cornice, have all been replaced with a fully glazed facade, and no other materials previously determined by HCC is appropriate. The current design proposal depicts glazed entrance doors flanked by display windows with transoms above which are appropriate to the district, pending confirmation that glazing is not tinted, colored, or reflective. Relevant design guidelines continue by depicting components of appropriate storefronts, which should also include a lower apron at the sidewalk level, a sign band over the storefront, which would be necessary for inevitable signage, and then also some kind of lost my track here, some kind of a cornice that would delineate the commercial entry level from the residential floors above. Thus, the redesigned fully glazed storefront is inappropriate due to the lack of typical design components. The Historic Conservation District includes many typical storefronts with recessed entrances, but with remaining shop windows aligned with the upper walls of the facade. However, the current design recesses the entire storefront assembly, both the doors and the windows, several feet back from the upper facade, So discussion is warranted to determine that appropriateness. So typically in the district, you have facades that have a storefront that's completely aligned with the walls above. You do have examples where the entrance is recessed. Sometimes it's in the corner, sometimes in the middle, etc. But typically the storefront windows themselves still come out and align with the walls above. And in this scenario, everything is recessed. So not only the door, but the entire storefront assembly. And we just don't see that in the district. The guidelines don't require it, but since we don't see it, I think it's worthy of discussion. The facades of the remaining floor levels include brick and glass, which were previously determined as appropriate. However, the original red brick masonry has been replaced with a, quote, light gray and dark gray brick, which are not typical within the district. Similarly, fiber cement panels that were previously considered appropriate have been replaced with, quote, wood tone metal panels and gray metal panels. In my notes, I'm referencing the previous project, but since they were there, I know that recently HCC has considered metal panel cladding for upper floor levels appropriate in limited applications. So I think this is worthy of some kind of discussion. The guidelines don't refer metal panels at all, so I can't say yes or no to them. But we're starting to see more and more HCC discussion about potential metal cladding, especially at uppermost floor levels. Oftentimes that's used to help mitigate the overall height of the building. So there's a transition between a more traditional brick facade and then say metal panels up at the top 1 or 2 floor levels. All of that would be worthy of discussion, and if appropriate, we would still need to see product samples or specifications, et cetera, so in a subsequent meeting, we would expect to see material submittals. The previous design had profiled cornice moldings that delineated changes in the facade, and they were determined to be appropriate, pending clarification about materials and profiles. However, the intermediate and upper cornices that we saw previously are no longer depicted with the current design. The east facade that would be visible above the neighboring structure, which was required previously to have some kind of delineation implying ghosting of windows, etc., is not depicted within the provided drawing sheet, so I can't determine the appropriateness of that at this time. Similarly, the south facade is not depicted within the current submittal, so I can't determine anything about that facade. The previous design included defined structural bays with windows that appropriately aligned vertically, while the current proposal includes inappropriate shifts in the window alignments between the 2nd and 3rd floor levels, and again between the 4th and 5th floor levels. So the guidelines talk about the rhythm and symmetry of windows, and as you go vertically, you have these structural bays, windows align within those bays. The previous certificate noted that the windows appropriately aligned. In the current scenario, we see a break of that tradition. So here you have 2 times where as you go vertically up the facade, windows shift and no longer align vertically within the structural bays. The relevant design guidelines state that new construction facades should have, quote, similar proportions of solids, meaning walls or siding, to voids, which are storefronts, windows, and door openings of any kind of neighboring buildings. The current floor-to-ceiling window openings are quite different from the previous openings and are contemporary in style and don't relate to the solids and voids of any nearby contributing structures. The relevant design guidelines also note that windows historically comprise approximately 1/4 of an exterior wall surface area, whereby the proposed window openings represent approximately 1/2 of the surface area. So here again, the guidelines talk about scale and pattern examples in the district where wall surfaces are proportionally much greater than window surface areas. And this project has about 50-50, 50% window openings to 50% closed walls. Relevant design guidelines also note that windows design guidelines continue that windows should be functionally similar and have similar muttons or grid patterns along with expressed sills and lintels to the neighboring neighborhood's historic buildings. The current windows are floor to ceiling, So they're not double hungs or traditional windows we're used to seeing, and they have no expressed lintels or sills. The previous design had windows that had expressed lintels and sills. So in closing, the certificate of appropriateness requirement for the applicant to submit specific material selections would still be valid. So any discussion today would still require the applicant to return at a later date for anything that is considered appropriate with specifications and preferably with samples so that we can see those materials.
Thank you, Jeffrey. I'm chairing for now. Would you please introduce yourselves and address the commission with the answers to some of the questions raised by the historic officer, and describe your project a little bit more clearly, please.
My name is Dennis Benner. I am the owner of the underlying applicant. With me is Antonio Da Silva. He's with Cidio Architects out of Philadelphia. This is a six-story building, 25 apartments, first floor restaurant. When I looked at the overall tenor of the south side, and especially along 4th Street, I decided to submit an application for this location as well as the one that's also on the agenda this evening, item number 6. And I was looking for some consistency with architecture, consistency with design. And I thought they would harmonize in a pretty good way. These buildings, well, let's just stay with this one. This building is substantially brick. There may be more glass than a previous application, but people like to look out windows, not at walls. And this is designed to be more contemporary in nature, as opposed to something that you would typically see in maybe in South Bethlehem.
Do we have a definition? We have a definition of the height in terms of stories, but we don't have, I don't believe we have the elevation in feet. Do you know that offhand?
Yeah, it's 67. Yeah, name is Antonio Fiosova. The elevation is 68 to the cornice, to the parapet, 67 from the street. You know, again, 4th Street is, as you know, the vine goes up, but it's measured from 4th Street.
Okay. Comments from the board?
What was the previous submittal, the 12 stories? What did you have for previous approval, or 9 stories? I apologize.
It was 9 stories.
9 stories? So you are coming down 3 stories.
Yeah, I thought it looked better when you look at and you read the whole streetscape along 4th Street in terms of what's that across the street. It's a lower building. The architecture is similar. If you look at the Lehigh dormitories virtually across the street, they're more, I guess more similar in style to what you see here. And when you move down 4th Street toward the Boys Club, you have the school down there that the Boys Club is adjacent to that had more contemporary, more modern architecture. And when Lehigh, or the folks that did the old Ice House building, it seemed like that was along the same lines. So I tried to fit this in, or I asked Antonio to try to harmonize the whole street in terms of the ups and the downs and the way it might present from an overall presentation. That's why I submitted both applications at the same time, because it's hard to look at one in an isolated way.
Yeah, the HCC does appreciate you coming down to 3 stories. It does fit a lot better in the size and scaling. Anybody have any questions?
Anyone else with comment, or do you have more, Mike?
Yeah, I have a couple. So from the drawing, the historic officer had mentioned about the metal panels. I apologize. Where did, from the description, I'm just trying to figure out, where do the metal panels start on the structure and where do they end? Or can you describe what floors they're on?
So essentially, the metal panels happen on the south facade and on the east facade, and which are generally not very visible, if at all, from the public. On the east, it's over the building that is there, two stories over. On the south, it's sort of hard up against an alley that is in that area, and just this, which you can see on the Vine Street facade that it's sort of set back. And it would be a gray toned metal that would blend with the color slates and some of the adjacent roofs. We'd be happy to go back to the fiber cement. Frankly, metal is a better material in terms of color, and it would match better with, say, the slates and so on. But that's something that we'd be very happy to entertain. But all of the main facades are brick.
I think the locations of the metal are appropriate where you currently have them.
Yeah.
I was just, now that you pointed them out, yes.
At the change level at approximately 45 feet, what is the setback at that point? Or is that in line with the lower part of the facade?
It's in line with the facade. So what happens there is that we strike a line to acknowledge the cornice of some of the adjacent buildings, that we see as a cornice made out of like an I-beam kind of section.
Okay, but it is not a setback
It's
as
not,
such.
yeah, it's not set back. It's at the same point.
So does the I-beam kind of form a sort of reveal?
Yeah, it forms a reveal and a shadow line, and
Okay.
it's a material that recalls the industrial heritage here, but really is also seen in some of the other structures.
Point of
And it
order.
holds the brick,
You're
right?
recusing yourself. You can't say anything.
Oh, okay. All right, fair enough. Yeah, apologies.
But I said to.
I'll ask then. So is there a recess in that levels that we just spoke about?
Yeah, so as you see there on the level where the adjacent buildings are
45
somewhat
foot
lower, the last two floors have changes, the brick changes in color, and there's an I-beam line there as there is on the other floor. So all the horizontal lines where the brick color changes is this sort of cornice interpretation, and that also happens on the top, although it's not very clear there. And the color of the brick, it's not the red that it was before, but we're actually saying is that we're going over we're like a drop or a color comparison and picking the color of the darker grayer, duller brick that is on the building to the right on that elevation. So the intent is to replicate the color of the bricks of existing building, but not make it all one monolithic red brick building, because we're really looking to break down the scale and acknowledge the cornice datum lines, horizontal datum lines of the adjacent buildings.
One other question I had or comment. Jeff had mentioned, and I just wanted to confirm, does the storefront align with the rest of the building, or is it set back?
The storefront is set back, and it's set back around the building as it turns. So if you look at the floor plan, if you may,
I have it in front of me.
you see that it's set back, and what it does is it creates an awning kind of condition to shield the storefront from the area. In response to the historic officer's comments, we'd be happy to also entertain adding some elements of solid, so that there is that recessed element that happens in some of the storefronts.
Right.
But again, it's important to the client and also to the street to really showcase the storefront. This is one place where the corner is very important. And as you see, as Vine Street climbs up, the idea is to create seating areas to activate the street, which is shown in the plan and in the renderings.
Anyone else with comment from the commission?
Yeah, I just have a question about the windows. Is this thing on?
Yeah, we can hear.
Jeffrey mentioned, about the rhythm of the windows and so forth, and the windows lining up on typical buildings on the south side. These don't necessarily do that, and they're really pretty oversized. Would you consider making some changes there to?
Yeah.
Would you like them bigger?
No.
I figured.
No, and I think
Yeah.
you'd like them smaller too, because if you have less glass, you're going to have better energy efficiency in the
Yeah.
building.
Yeah, if I may suggest, but of course, the client will stop me if he doesn't like the idea, but we're happy to regularize the windows some, but we think that as the floors go and change colors, that it's good that they breathe a little bit, that they don't look so stiff. But I think that the one, and we'd be happy to entertain versions of that are more regularized, in a way that they don't look disorganized, which I don't think they do right now, but we can go there. The one thing I would politely sort of point out is that there are buildings that have a 50-50 ratio of the solid, and actually, if one might go to the other view, the Vine Street elevation, if you may. The building just to the south of it is a very historic building, and the windows are really quite large. And I think that it's important. I don't know if it's hard to see in that photo, but it's important to really get larger windows and get light and air into these apartments, and it's important for the inhabitants. And I think that we can achieve a sense of a building that brick is a predominant reading, because the windows are recessed. But there is precedent, like in that building adjacent to that actually more than 50. It's hard to see, but if maybe you can see from your drawing, that more than 50% of that, or at least 50% of it, is actually glass, or pretty close to it. So we'd be happy to look at that level of detail as well. As we come back and come with the samples of the materials and those kind of finer scaled kind of issues with the building.
I can tell you that from a market standpoint, I own a building with along these lines at Center Square in Easton. And the number one attraction for the building and for the apartments are the larger windows. I hear it time and time again, to the point that I have a waiting list for people trying to get into the buildings because of the windows. So I'm very sensitive to the window size, because I know that's what the market is calling for. This is not, these are a little different kinds of apartments. These are not what you're going to see in a lot of areas in the South Side. I'm sure they're all lovely, but I'm looking for something a little different here, because I need to separate these buildings from others that are going to be built down there.
I don't want to be a wise guy, but I don't think we care about the market. That's not our job.
So I understand that, but
That's
I will not to be a wise guy. I do care about it, because I got to pay for it.
So we have no wise guys here, right?
Yeah.
Anyone else from the commission have comment at this point?
Yeah, a couple more. So the windows, they all land on rooms, or there's no, like intermittent.
Yeah, they all land on rooms. Legally required windows, so they're all
Right.
land on rooms and living rooms and bedrooms.
Okay.
And the bathrooms are all internal, so that every window that is there is legally required for a room or living room that's there.
Okay.
Is there any public comment at this point? regarding the structure at 24 to 30 West 4th Street. Please. I'd ask you to use the microphone. Give us your name and your address, please.
I'm Kim Carroll Smith. I live at 833 Carlton Avenue. I just wanted to say I'm really thrilled to see that the building is shorter than it was. It's beginning to fit in with what is in that streetscape, and I think that's really exciting. I did have a question about, I don't quite understand the process always and what it is that's required, but are you going to require photos of those adjacent buildings so that you can get a sense of the windows and that sort of thing? I hope. The other thing is the shadow drawings. I do have a concern, and it's been expressed by a couple of the business owners across the street, which is what will happen with the shadowing from that building. And if you have shadow drawings, you can maybe get a better sense of that. I think that was one of the things people really asked for with the Greenway shadowing, but it's true of that part of 4th Street as well. And just to note that if you're not like an everyday passerby on that section of 4th Street, that is a very narrow street. And I think that was one of the concerns we originally had with the building being so high, is that it seems like it just looms, that it's really massive on a narrow stretch, as compared to, like a 3rd Street or somewhere where the building seems wider. So I think it would be really helpful to have shadow drawings. And then I just had one question about the comparisons about size and scale. And I know this isn't, like something that this decision hinges on at the moment, but I just heard the comparisons to a lot of different buildings and why it fits in. And I have a concern that I believe that the guidelines specify that you're looking at the contributing structures, which are contributing as part of the historic district, not the other buildings. They're there, but they don't count in this consideration, right? So, look at the Broadhead building, the Lehigh owns, you don't look at the Rooney building, you don't look at Litzenberger House, you look at the buildings that are there. So, is that right?
That's right.
Okay, all right, thanks.
Thank you. Anyone else with a comment from public? Please.
Bill Shirey, 1890 Eaton Avenue. I also appreciate that the building is now 6 stories rather than 9, and 4 would be even better. But I also appreciate that there's some variation in the levels. It makes it a little less repetitive and so on, and makes it a little less clashing with the rest of the street. I would suggest, though, if this would be possible, that the top story, which whatever it might be, would have some cornice work. That would be a nod to the older commercial buildings in the area. To me, the most distinguishing feature of them are the cornices. So something that hopefully wouldn't cost too much. That would be a nod to the historic character and would produce a little more harmony in the streetscape. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other comments? Okay. Seth?
Yeah, I'd also like to reiterate that everybody hear me?
Yeah, no, sorry.
Can everybody hear me now?
I think you gotta press the button.
Yeah, I gotta press it.
Sounds like it's on.
It's on, right?
It's on.
It's this stupid
Yeah.
mask here. Hold on a second.
Okay.
Sorry, I can't wear this freaking mask all night long. Now I look really stupid. No, I'd like to reiterate, I think that a couple people have said the building being lower looks good. And I also think that breaking up the levels is really good.
I'm not sure that having these larger windows is necessarily inappropriate for our district, given the building is not trying to mimic a, you know, a building that was built in our, you know, in our era. And I cannot, I'm sorry, remember the,
Up to 1890,
which,
19.
no, which is, you know, where it says in the Secretary of Interior standards that you can build something that's sort of modern and not try to have it look like your district. So I recall that's one of our
Standard 10.
sorry, with standard 10. My concern though is I think if the windows were more evenly spaced and not even necessarily every row all the way up and down, but like as I'm looking at I'm going to call it the middle section, they don't flow. They start from left to right, and all of a sudden they alternate. And I think it would fit the district better if it was a little bit more uniform, even though it was, you know, if just that middle section was more uniform. I don't know if I'm expressing myself very well. Anybody understand what I said?
Yeah, I think we get it. I mean, I think it comes back to the comments of modulating a little bit the syncopation, you know, the differences of them. And I think there can be a happy medium about
I
it.
think you've got that from here to here. I don't think you want to do that this way also. It's just,
Horizontally. Yeah.
that's just,
Right.
you know, a thought. It's. Thank you.
Anything else?
No?
Does anyone have a motion?
I do. I'd like to make a motion to accept the project as presented and give them a certificate of occupancy to continue in the process. I like this. It looks good. I think it's going to be a major plus for that area of the south side.
Is there anything in your motion, Roger, to deal with a submission on window placement or size?
Taking into consideration what was discussed here, right?
Yeah.
You guys are.
Yeah, I think it will come back and come with samples and
That, you know,
we're
I
developing
assume
drawings, so
that you will make those modifications.
Yeah,
In my motion.
we'll take all those comments.
Okay, thank you, Roger.
When you come back, are you going to also do the storefront or the restaurant front, or is that
Yeah,
the design for the?
So you don't.
I know you may not have a tenant yet, but I mean a design for the.
It's an improvement.
Are you?
Yeah, I think that to the comment of the officer, it's appropriate to put a sign ban because it's going to come and we're going to have more detail on the storefront.
Okay.
So I think there'll be larger scale drawings where we can see that level of detail.
I'll second.
Any other discussion? One other point that I would add to this is that when you make a subsequent submission, that it included, more detailed shadow definitions.
Yeah, we actually have it in the mall. We could readily, to the lady's comment, come back. I think that because the building is shorter and it is on the corner, and some of the other buildings are just, you know, I think it's not going to have a negative impact in there, but we're happy to do that.
It's an element that I think we had not in the past considered quite as significantly, but we're starting to discover that it has an impact, and that the constituents of the district raised the question to us. So it's our responsibility to pass that question on.
Well, in this particular case, I own not all, but substantially all of the properties across the street, so to the extent it would be a shadow,
Okay.
I'm shooting myself in the foot. I'm not looking to do that.
All right. I'd like to call a vote, please. Chaz?
Aye.
Mike?
Aye.
Mr. Later is
Recused.
recused.
That's right.
Aye.
Ken? Roger?
Aye.
Seth?
Aye.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, it is 317, 327 South New Street here. Good to see you. Please come on up.
There we go. You could bring those, you wanna? You guys wanna pass it around, or you want me to put it on the easel?
Oh, easel's fine, or up against the podium.
You can pass the one around. There you go.
Also have a
Oh, okay, yeah. You can start with Chaz. And it's Jordan, right?
Yes.
Yeah, please announce yourself and sign in.
Yes, Jordan Clark. I'm with the Bellona Group, the architects for the project.
So just for public clarification, we backtracked. This is now agenda item number 3.
That's correct.
And also as a reminder, Mr. Lausch has refrained from participating. Is that correct in this discussion item?
We're going backwards here. Is that-
Yeah, we're doing
Yes,
great.
that's right.
Gotcha.
Is that correct, Mr. Lausch? Okay, thank you. 317 to 327 South New Street. For the benefit of time, I'm not going to give the building descriptions of the various properties. This applicant has been in front of us several times. It is in the minutes. But considering the weight of the agenda, unless someone has an objection, I'm going to refrain from describing those, especially considering the previous resolution. It is proposed to construct a new multi-story mixed-use structure that incorporates the facade of an existing contributing building at the site. The guideline citations utilized for my assessment include Secretary of Interior Standard Number 5 concerning the distinctive materials, features, and finishes of the existing building, specifically concerning the salvage facade. Similarly, Secretary of Interior Standards Number 6 concerning deteriorated features would be repaired rather than replaced. Also specific to the salvage facade. Secretary of Interior Standards Number 9 concerning new construction that we've heard in the previous agenda items. Bethlehem Ordinance, Mr. Later read at the beginning of tonight's meeting. There are specific guidelines for the Historic Conservation District concerning new construction. I referenced some of those previously. They concern size, scale, and proportion, rhythm and patterns, window and door openings, materials and textures, architectural details, shapes and massing, as well as streetscapes. Similar to the previous design proposal, this has potential for awnings and signage, so I've included those specific guidelines, and also the design guidelines specific for storefronts within the district. My evaluation and recommendations. The applicant presented during the HCC meeting on January the 25th of 2021, as well as February 22nd, 2021, resulting in a motion for City Council to deny the request to demolish the existing structures and replace them with a 13-story mixed-use development project. Motion passed 6-0 with 1 abstention. HCC appreciated the integration of the historical facade at 321 to 323 South New Street into the overall design and noted the relative success of the storefronts at the street level. However, the height of the proposed high-rise was determined inappropriate for the immediate streetscape as well as for the overall district. The applicant returned to HCC on April 26, 2021 with a revised proposal for a 10-story design, and yet again on June 21st, 2021 with a similar 9-story design. That meeting resulted in a motion against the recommendation by the historic officer for City Council to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the proposed work. That work included several bullet points I'm going to summarize. Demolition of all the structures at 319, 321 through 323, 325, and 327 South New Street, except for the 3-story Italianate front facade at 321 to 323. It included the rehabilitation of that salvage facade for integration into the overall project development. It included a replacement structure for all the lost buildings would be a 9-story mixed-use building that measures approximately 110 feet wide, approximately 75 feet deep, approximately 88 feet high at the shortest or southwest corner, and approximately 92 feet at the tallest or northwest corner, excluding any mechanical penthouse. The entry level included 6,500 square feet of commercial and community spaces, while the upper floor levels included 8,000 square feet each, with a mix of 1 bedroom, 1 bath, as well as 2 bedroom, 2 bath apartments. Floor heights of the lowest levels were to match those of the neighboring buildings, while the intermediate cornice above the floor level emphasizes a transition from the commercial street level to the residential floor levels above. HCC motion passed 4-2, so 4 in favor, 2 against, with 1 abstention. City Council approved the motion during the subsequent meeting on July the 6th, 2021. The current certificate of appropriateness application represents the response to HCC's recommendation that future project development should better unify the upper level facades with the facades at the street level for a more cohesive design, and also address such issues as window and door types, cast sills and lintels, cornice profiles, and facade materials, along with street-level storefronts with awnings. The accompanying drawings indicate the current design proposal still envisions the demolition of all the existing structures while integrating the salvage front facade at 321 to 323 South New Street. The applicant should be prepared to clarify any intended approach to protect the historical facade during the pending demolition as well as the resulting rehabilitation efforts. I couldn't find in the submittals any reference beyond the pictorial depiction of the rescued facade. It's possible they're not that far enough along, but I do think it's important that if they've made some conclusions or initial determinations, we should at least hear about those. The proposed design remains a 9-story mixed-use building that measures approximately 110 feet wide, 75 feet deep, 88 feet high at the shortest, and 92 feet at the tallest corner. But now includes a mechanical penthouse, which we don't assess, so I'm not saying it's right or wrong. It just didn't have it before. But the penthouse is obscured from view by a louvered equipment screening. The upper level facades now appropriately align with the street level facades, resulting in a more cohesive design, while the storefronts appropriately respond to the pitch of South New Street by stepping down to meet the adjacent public sidewalk. The original proposal had just kind of an average entrance, and this now much more appropriately steps with the pitch of the street, and the entrance doors appropriately meet the sidewalk as it pitches downward. Aside from the rehabilitated historical facade, the initial 3 floor levels are clad in large format limestone panels, which are appropriate based on the guidelines. The proposed storefronts are appropriate pending clarification about any frame materials. Usually we see, aluminum or bronze or something like that. It's just not labeled. And confirmation that the glass is not tinted, colored, or reflective. I'm assuming the blue is just to indicate that it's glass, and it doesn't mean that it's actually blue. The awnings above the storefronts are open ends, which are appropriate, as we heard previously, pending confirmation that the fabric is a canvas or canvas-like woven vinyl. We allow both of those. There are above the storefronts. It's a little hard to see on the projection here, but above the awnings, there are paneled sign bands. Those are typical. We have those throughout the district. They're just not currently labeled, so we just like a little bit of clarification about your vision for those sign bands. There are similar paneled cladding, or there is similar paneled cladding at the far, in this view, the far left. So that would be at the second level facade above the passageway to East Grand Place. And then we see one support column, and around the corner there are several. The support columns also have similar paneling. So when we have clarification about the sign ban, I'm requesting clarification about those as well. The exterior cladding of the 4th through the 7th floor levels is a smaller format limestone panels for vertical window groupings. So the groupings of windows with a kind of a light background, it's labeled as limestone, but they have a smaller format in the lower, which would be appropriate. And a dark red brick Eltzer, which we've already heard is appropriate within the district. Although we would prefer, and maybe that was what you submitted, we would like to see specifications of the product samples. The 2 uppermost floor levels are proposed for metal panels, which are not identified with the design guidelines as appropriate. However, HCC has recently been determining metal panel siding appropriate for uppermost floor levels of similar high rises to help mitigate the visual impact of the overall building height. So again, my hands are tied. I can't say they're appropriate or not because they're not identified, but I think it is worthy of discussion during the discussion portion of tonight's meeting. The profiled cornice moldings delineate changes in the facade cladding, and such cornices are considered appropriate according to the guidelines, yet again pending an understanding about the materials and profiles. HCC prefers cast stone if possible. Provided drawings also indicate brick facades at the 4th through 7th levels, and maybe it's just a issue of the drawing, and it's hard to see at this level, but on what we received, the brick portion seemed to extend out several inches beyond below, which would be inappropriate. So again, maybe it's just a matter of the drawing itself, but the kind of middle floor levels don't need to bulge out. It should really be aligned, if not set back. Similarly, there are 2 intermediate structural posts on the north facade. We don't see that facade currently. They interrupt the windows above. So either the windows need to move slightly or the posts need to move slightly so that the posts are aligned between the windows rather than interrupting the windows. The applicant should also consider setting back the 2 uppermost floor levels to help mitigate the visual impact of the overall building height. Based on these drawings, it looks like the walls are through. There's no dimensional difference. And I do recall that from the previous discussion, at least considering it. Maybe you considered and you have a response to that request. Window replacements have also improved since the previous submittal. 1/1 double hung sash windows with express sills and lintels as depicted are appropriate. Pending submittals of specifications. Again, maybe that's something that you just submitted. With HCC preference for cast stone elements for the sills and lintels. Most windows are depicted with dark panels beneath the sills. However, that material is not indicated on the drawing, so clarification is warranted. The relevant design guidelines indicate, quote, plain, modern, flush doors are inappropriate within the district. And again, we don't see that here, but the rear or east elevation facade seems to have utilitarian doors. So we would agree to bend the rules for those. They're utilitarian in nature. However, we do for our minutes need an understanding of their materiality. They're currently slightly off. Again, if you could, best would be to align the center lines of those with the center lines of the window bays above. I think they're almost there. They just need a little bit of tweaking. And I couldn't find any clarification of how the inevitable trash collection would be completed. No, maybe one of those doors is a trash room or something. I just couldn't see that from the provided drawings.
Okay. Thank you, Jeffrey. And Jordan, if you want to walk us through, what you're proposing on this latest set of drawings.
Sure. As you'll see up here, the samples we brought. So if we work from the top down, I guess that might be easier.
Okay.
We were transitioning to a standard aluminum metal panel. We brought a sample of that with us here that is the color we're proposing to provide a lighter presence. The brick veneer, we're calling it veneer because it's going to be a stucco based product that'll allow for some economically able to help. We're looking to use a panelized system
Mhm.
for erection on the site, also economics. But if you'll see, it does have the appearance and feel of brick.
What is it so it's like a stucco type product?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it's stucco over continuous insulation board, which gets adhered to the structural framing.
Is the panel that you have up above, is that the color you're looking to do?
For the metal?
Yeah.
Just about, yes.
Okay.
I'd like a shade darker, but it's very hard to get samples right now.
Okay.
And then all of the stonework from the ground floor to the first cornice would be cast stone or limestone, depending on cost. We just could not get a sample of that.
Okay.
And the upper cornice would also be cast stone, as mentioned.
Okay.
Where else were we? In regards to the keeping the facade, we've been slowly getting there on the process. Again, it's going to be a little bit of a work in process as we will hopefully begin demolition. But right now our plan is to mechanically brace it from either side, shore it up into our excavated area, and then down again to the sidewalk. We'll be requesting from the city to close the sidewalk during the project so that there's no difficulty there. It's also going to coincide with the new streetscape project, so we'll be putting in the sidewalks there, the new sidewalks as well at completion of construction. The windows or the storefronts are clear. They are just tinted blue to indicate glass easier.
Okay.
The paneling for the signs and the overhang area spanning East Grand Place, that would also be a stucco panel look. It would have the dimensional characteristics to it to appear as a recessed panel, but it would all be a stucco-based product for maintenance issue as well.
I'm sorry, which item was that you were just talking about?
The sign panels
Okay.
and the columns and detail over the East Grand Place.
Okay. How about the cornice? What do you propose to use for the cornice? detail?
Cast stone.
Okay. But for both the lower one and the upper one?
Yes.
How did so the newest thing I think is the metal panels on the two upper floors. How did that come into the picture?
That was based on our previous discussions with the committee. We had a subsequent presentation to them. We are totally flexible on that. That could go to the limestone look as well. Our previous submission did show that as limestone, but we'd like to kind of marry it to more of a contemporary look as well for the future of the area.
Okay.
So those metal panels would be nearly identical to what's across the street. So we're trying to tie the whole corner down to there together.
Yeah, I mean, that certainly makes sense in some ways. I'd like to, when I was walking around the site just yesterday, I noticed, one of my concerns is the back part of the building, I think is going to be really very, very visible. And I was also trying to figure out, there's an existing stone retaining wall that runs along the greenway. And, I don't know if we had ever seen a site plan for this project. Have we? So I'm just trying to figure
Previous
out.
site plans were submitted. Previous submissions did have the site plan, yes.
Okay. And, of course, what I'm trying to figure out is, what's going to be visible and accessible to the greenway, number one. And then number two, when I'm looking at your ground floor plan, the back of the building looks very solid right now. And I'm wondering, it seems like a great opportunity for you if this is all retail and it's facing the greenway. Why not add a lot? You could add a lot of glass and really open it up and make it something.
We previously did, and that's still something we hope to do if the cost of a foundation of a basement makes sense. We've had to pull our utilities to the first floor.
Mhm.
And then the retail tenant right now is targeted toward the restaurant market. So the kitchen will be located off that back wall.
Well,
So,
on the back.
yeah, so glass wouldn't make sense there. Previous submissions did indicate on our floor plans that back part of the building there on the lobby side would be a community space or, amenity space for the building. But right now with the cost, the basement wasn't feasible. We're hoping that we can get it there with the reduction in floor heights that we took.
Well, I think because it's so important what that building looks like from the backside, you know, I'd like you to consider more closely, you know, perhaps there's ways to locate the kitchens so that you could still get more glass on the side facing the greenway and really activate that back area. And I'm sure it will be helpful for patrons too. You know, I mean, of course, I have no clue as to how many eateries and you know, and kitchens you're going to need back there, but yeah, I hope it's something. I think it's something that will really help the building design.
Are you doing trash out the back too?
Yes, if we could go to the rear elevation.
Are you doing trash out the back too?
So the building is equipped with the trash chute, a bi-sorting trash chute for recycling and trash. And there's a set of double doors, so the containers are small in nature, and they would be wheeled out the back for collection in the alley.
I also agree with Jeffrey's comments that you need to look at those back doors on the, I'm sorry, was it the east elevation?
We can slide those up to center easily. That's
Yeah, it looks like it'd be easy to do. My thought was, again, because, you know, because it might be very visible from the Greenway side, that you try and make that area not look so much like a service area, but, you know, maybe just doing simple things that, like putting a canopy over those doors, you know, might also help make it less like a, you know, the backside of the building. And again, you know, I'm just assuming that it's going to be very visible from the Greenway.
It doesn't read, we have renderings that help a little better. It doesn't read so great into, you know, on a flat projection image.
Yeah, understood. Yeah, and I guess, yeah, and you know, you're right. Some of the perspectives kind of give a better idea of how it's going to relate to that area. Oh, okay, and I do see. Yeah, I mean, yeah, I don't. I mean, actually, if you look at the street view, looking west from the Greenway, then, you know, then it really jumps out at you that a lot of that stuff is exposed. But I know the reality is there's like a retaining wall and there's more buildings in the way.
And we're anticipating rebuilding that retaining wall
Okay.
during construction.
I got a bunch more comments, but I don't want to dominate the conversation. So if anybody else,
Go ahead.
keep going. All right.
Jump in when it's appropriate.
All right. So, you know, I don't think I have so much a problem with the metal panel, really. I still question the scale of things. I mean, to me, I think maybe the main thing is that the building just still isn't looking very cohesive. I would say it's a little disjointed. And I think the vocabulary you're looking for is a more traditional looking kind of building, and that's fine too. So with it being a more traditional kind of building and for it to be more appropriate for what's in our district, I would say that, you know, this kind of building does deserve a cornice at the roof line. And, you know, I found myself just looking at some of the other neighboring buildings, you know, particularly the one just right up the street. And you know, I guess one of my comments is I'd like to see a reference some more of these, you know, if you're doing a traditional design like this, as opposed to the, you know, project we just saw, I think maybe you should reference more of these kind of traditional details like a roof cornice. And you know, even the building across the street, although it's a non-contributing building, it has a pretty strong cornice line at the roof. But I think, you know, maybe for what you're doing with all these traditional materials, you need to give it some more detail.
That's fine. We have no issue with going back to the limestone up there in the cornice. I mean, that's what was submitted previously.
Yeah, and I'm not even sure I'm necessarily saying that. I think it's more just the division of the materials that is important. You know, in some ways, I think, you know, using metal panel, maybe that's a great idea because it helps it relate to your neighbor across the street. I think it's maybe just some of the architectural elements that I think would make the building more appropriate and fit, be a better neighbor. Working down from there, I am not quite sure about the limestone veneer you have around the windows. And again, the reason I say that is because when I look at many of the buildings in the district, particularly in that neighborhood, what I see is, solid panels of brick around windows. And I think that is something that helps with the scale. But in saying that, here's some of the things that I think really are working well for you that I think also help with the scale. I think it's great how you located the cornices. I think the cornice at the third floor level works great, and I think the limestone at the base for the first 3 floors I think is going to really make it look like an elegant building. I think when you go up to the 8th floor line, that cornice line, I think really helps too. I think it really helps, reduce the, make the building seem less massive, so I just wanted to, put in a couple of helpful comments there for you too. When I go to the back of the building, the east elevation, somehow it's just looking kind of massive and monotonous in comparison to the west elevation. I think it's because you space the windows out differently, and you don't have as much brick. So, again, because I'm so concerned with the side facing the greenway, I think it's going to be so visible. I'm hoping you could do something to. I just think it needs some more attention on that side. The last comment I'd like to make is I'm still not 100% sold on how you integrated the facade of the existing building to remain. I think it's in some ways it's working. It's sure, I think everybody appreciates that the effort you're going through on it, but some of the things I think that make it funny are, so you have the existing cornice and it steps up into those apartment windows, but then the new doesn't seem to line up with anything. And I'll tell you, it's a tough thing. I understand. It's but that's just one thing that jumps out at me. The only thing I was curious about is I noticed every unit has a vent, I guess, for a PTAC unit. What are you doing for the units that are broken up there?
We're still working that out,
Okay.
but they may have a different air system in those 2 units.
Okay. All right. Okay, so one last thing, I'm sorry. I don't think we can accept a EFIS type brick product. That's not something we've typically accepted before. Brick coat we usually find inappropriate. I think we could accept a thin brick veneer, but not a stucco type product.
Yeah, I can reiterate the guidelines specifically say no EFIS.
Mhm.
That's considered inappropriate. I had not seen this product before. Otherwise, I would have called it out in my description.
Yeah. And actually, I'm surprised though, based on all the other materials you're using, you're using limestone and cast stone and stuff like that. So I could certainly understand the cost part of it, but with all the other quality materials you're using, it seems like you'd want to use even if it's a thin brick veneer, I think that's what you'd want to go towards.
As long as it's compatible with the wall panelization, which I know it is.
Sure.
But I mean, I don't make the decision on cost.
Okay. Yeah. All right. And I think that's all I have for this round. And I certainly welcome some more comments from everyone here.
I think one of the things that's not clear to me is if we go to the metal panels siding the upper stories, that gives a sort of de minimis approach to those levels. And at the same time, we're looking for a cornice line at the top that defines the stop of that. And it's just not clear to me which is the better approach. But something about it doesn't make the building fit the context of the surroundings. And I'm not sure if it needs a cornice to do that or if it needs to have this metal paneling that
Yeah.
blends skyward.
Yeah, and again, I think the metal panel is something we could buy into, but, I think it's just things are still not quite tying together on it, you know? If there's no other comments or feedback from the commission, may I go ahead and invite anyone from the public who wants to talk? Yeah, so if there's anyone from the public who'd like to comment on this project, please present yourself now. Okay. I think maybe the most appropriate thing to do right now is perhaps I think I'd like to make a motion to table this. If that's so that's what I'll do. Let's see. I'd like to make a motion to table the project for 317, 327 South New Street. And we are requesting that the applicant come before us next time addressing such things as cornice lines, maybe creating a more unified facade, addressing the design of the rear and particularly its relation to the greenway, paying attention to centering service doors and studying the possibility of adding glass storefront, with the idea that that's also part of the public way. And it should be noted too that we find the EFS brick product inappropriate for our district, but other materials presented we find appropriate. We hope next time you could bring an actual sample of the cast stone or the limestone products that you're planning to use.
My major concern with this from the beginning was, and I spent a lot of time with this project, if you'll notice where the what's the name of that street? The alley. Yeah, the alley goes through on that ground floor and the second floor. So you guys don't own that alley, okay? And my concern to the mayor and the mayor's office was, does this set a precedent? You're going to pay taxes on the square footage of all of the property above that tunnel, which was my major concern, because if we start doing that, you could build over a 3rd Street or 4th, and not have the taxes, but you're going to pay taxes on all the square footage of the entire building except for that tunnel.
Well, the only thing I can say, Roger, is, good points, just not our concern.
Yeah. Yeah. But that does, to me, that's not a sticking point now with the project. It's a big plus. I hope you can do something with a facade that will emulate the Pat's newsstand there, you know, the front, so then, and I think you do pay some service to it, you know, but other than that, that's,
You have a motion on the table?
I have a motion to table on the table.
Second.
Thank you. We'll put it to vote. Craig Evans,
Aye.
Seth Cornish,
Aye.
Roger Hudak.
I,
As well vote aye. Mike Simonson and Chaz Patrick.
Aye.
Okay, motion to table carries. Jordan, thank you for your efforts.
done here.
You. So we are at our next, I think we are up to 128 East Third Street. Oh, okay, we need a timeout, don't we? Okay,
Sorry, Ken.
actually,
5 minutes.
okay,
Let's take a 5-minute break, can we?
you know, that sounds great. So 5-minute break. I forgot, I could actually use one too.
Engineer is gonna be
Kill.
although I don't know how the Leopards have done on Saturday. They had one game, they had one more win. That's all they had was one more win. Yeah, well, that's.
Scram see if I can find something.
Okay, right when you get to.
And you're gonna put you on this video.
No, hi.
It's nice to meet you.
You too.
Okay.
You know, I think I saw you in the background because I told you to see the go-to meeting video and there would be someone in the background helping.
I'm technical support.
I need technical support too, so don't worry about it. Oh, yeah, so. What do you mean?
The brick. You're a bunch of crazy people. Do you remember golf course? When all of them were- They were crazy people.
That was like yours. I know. This was yours. That's what I thought.
So many projects, too little time.
That's true. That's true. And it's not only Bethlehem, I know. It's East
That's,
End and
that's
wherever
what,
else.
that's what our fiance will say.
And she better do other things.
At least part of the time.
That's right. I get you. I get you. How you doing, Antonio?
Yeah, of course. Nice to see you.
No worries. Are you in this? Yeah. I love that ring bell. Why did you let me sell it?
Nobody can stop
This is-
you
this is-
when you make up your mind, Dennis.
I have to see it come to. Yeah.
Big weekend coming for you.
No, I think.
Hopefully. I mean, hopefully. Can I buy a pass now?
You'll get in, don't worry. I'll let you
Oh, the only thing I saw up there was the bread panel. Yes, it was the window, it was just a brochure. That might be it, actually.
Maybe I'll stay, watch the third.
So this one perplexed me.
I think the company was Sturgis.
So that perplexed me.
Chad, right? Hey, it's nice to see you. I was wondering if you remembered me.
Yeah, I got warned when.
Yes. Oh, so he still owns that. Okay. Yes, that's kind of mysterious to me what they do there, but.
It's like almost like an Amazon. They have stuff in there.
Is it all like food related?
I think it's.
Yeah, and you know what? I had forgotten that we were talking about that, and boy, your idea would have been so much better. Yeah. Yeah.
I still think.
Oh, I didn't know. That sounds familiar.
I've never seen like.
Yeah, but you know, I'm glad to see what you're doing on that. Yeah. Boy, there's so many nice buildings on that stretch. Yeah, well, gosh, I mean, it's just everybody is just really itchy. You know,
So then it says, I don't know how you let me sell that building because it looks so good. So I think he wants to buy back from you, but at a discount, at a deep discount.
He still worked there when I became legal. I see him occasionally in there. But then I was legal and he knew it.
yeah, it's interesting. I took my son Saturday night to a concert at William Symphony Hall.
Yeah, those.
And you know, I didn't want to deal with traffic in the parking deck. I said,
Those were the stories he could tell.
Oh, man.
Stuff that happened on the patio.
Yeah.
I mean,
I was really surprised.
I can't believe that teachers weren't stupid. That
Yeah.
they didn't know that there was a
Chad, I
lot of
appreciate
weed
it. Yeah, I'm glad to see you too.
patio. Right? Of course.
Hell, you
I'm
can
not-
walk
no,
by, you
how-
can smell it
but
down on freaking.
But that's what I'm saying. Like and we, as a kid, we all thought we were smarter.
You learn
No, not a
there are
kid.
certain things that cannot be controlled.
everyone was just too heavy. I was having a hard time breathing.
True.
And if you
They have the same mask.
attempt to control them, you're.
And they played yesterday, so
Yeah,
they played yesterday.
It doesn't work.
Do it. Yeah, you're all right.
Well, Mr. Spurt suspended me one day.
Lots if you follow your time.
My senior year, he suspended me.
Well,
Head tins.
Actually, Craig
Like, we didn't want to be in school. All you did was give us a reason not to show up.
Yeah.
I mean,
Hey, I'd like to call this meeting back to order. And as soon as everybody's ready. And I think, Jeffrey, are we up to 128 East Third now? Oh, well, we have our applicants here, so that confirms it. Okay, hi.
Yeah,
Okay,
Agenda item number 5, yes.
okay, and please announce yourselves and sign in if you haven't yet.
Plemon Vazu, the owner.
Mhm.
I'm Paul Herrick from Holzinger, Herrick and Scamillia. I'm the attorney for the applicant.
Okay,
Antonio Fil Silva from CTO Architects.
thank you.
Building description, period style, and defining features. This structure is a one-story detached brick masonry commercial building, partially clad in vertical metal panel siding. It was originally constructed in the late 1800s as a 3-story furniture store, but the front facade has been significantly altered and currently includes a recessed commercial entrance with a contemporary storefront windows and an applied shed roof with asphalt shingles. The structure experienced several rear additions so that it extends the entire depth of the block to Mechanic Street. The side and rear facades of brick masonry dating from the 19th and early 20th centuries, as evidenced by the segmental brick arched window and door openings. The architectural features have been lost over time, so it can no longer be assigned a defining style. Proposed alterations, it is proposed to demolish the existing single-story building and construct a new 6-story mixed-use structure. Guidelines I utilized for my assessment include the Secretary of Interior Standards number 9, you've referenced in several of the previous agenda items concerning new additions, etc. The Bethlehem ordinance that was read by Mr. Later at the beginning of tonight's meeting. The design guidelines concerning new construction for the district. I've said those components previously twice concerning size, scale, and proportion, rhythm and patterns, window and door openings, materials and textures, architectural details, shape and massing, as well as streetscapes. And then finally, the specific guidelines concerning design of storefronts within the district. My evaluation, the effect on the district and recommendations. The applicant presented during the HCC meeting on October 18, 2021, resulting in unanimously supported motion to table any decision about the proposed demolition and new development project. HCC encouraged the applicant to return for subsequent review of revised design proposal that responds to the expressed concerns. Those concerns included the size, scale, and proportions of the overall structure, along with such details as the non-traditional storefronts, the punch window openings, and no express sills and lintels. The applicant offered to utilize a computer-generated street model for viewing the proposed project from various pedestrian-level vantage points within the conservation district. HCC welcomed the opportunity outside the traditional HCC meeting to view the applicant's computer models. However, such a meeting has yet to be scheduled. The applicant currently requests continued discussion of the initial certificate of appropriateness application with no revisions to the original design proposal, but supplemented by 2 new drawing sheets with aerial views of the project viewed from 4 vantage points above the Historic Conservation District. Those views include computer-generated depictions of the design proposal imported into each view. For the benefit of the commission members, I think those are pages 2 and 3. I don't have them listed here, the page numbers, but I think based on what I see up on the screen. Several views strategically include glimpses of distant larger scale buildings as well. However, most depicted taller structures are either outside the boundaries of the district, for example, Lehigh University campus, or the former Bethlehem Steel site, etc., or they date after the district's period of interpretation, which spans 1895 to 1950. That makes all of those non-contributing to the district and not part of the streetscape and the greater neighborhood when applying the relevant design guidelines. The certificate of appropriateness application indicates the intent to demolish the existing main structure along with the rear additions and replace with a new commercial and residential building. The accompanying drawing sheets depict the proposed replacement structure as a 6-story mixed-use building approximately 80 feet wide, approximately 135 feet deep, approximately 68 feet high with no mechanical penthouse. The proposed entry level includes approximately 2,500 square feet of commercial space located at the corner of East 3rd Street and Webster Street, with the remaining square footage dedicated to support spaces for residential tenants. The proposed upper floor levels include a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom apartments totaling 55 units, with private terraces for select upper level units. Provided drawings do not indicate any below-grade basement, cellar level, or on-street parking. HCC previously expressed consensus that the existing structure no longer contributes to the Historic Conservation District due to the limited remnants of the original building fabric, so request to approve demolition is predicated on the applicant's ability to replace the lost building with a new structure that satisfies various or relevant Secretary of Interior standards, as well as relevant design guidelines concerning size, scale, massing, and proportions. The current design proposal fills the void left by the demolished structures, which is appropriate. However, the guidelines continue by noting, quote, new construction should reflect the dominant cornice and roof heights of the adjacent buildings and proportions of the building elements to one another in the streetscape. And they continue, quote, in South Bethlehem, where 2-, 3-, and 4-story buildings are the norm, buildings that digress from these standards by any great degree seriously impact the Historic Conservation District. If large-scale construction is considered, particular attention must be given to the effect of the proposed building on the streetscape and to the district as a whole, end quote. The current design proposal digresses from the dominant cornice heights of the nearby contributing structures, which are 2, 2.5, and 3 stories tall, by rising a total of 6 stories. The design guidelines continue that new construction facades should have, quote, similar proportions of solids, walls and siding to voids, storefronts, windows, and doors of the neighboring buildings. And we heard that in the same designer's submittal to projects previous. The large-scale punched openings of the current design proposal are contemporary in style and do not relate to the solids and voids of the nearby contributing structures. The relevant design guidelines also note that windows historically comprise approximately 1/4 of the exterior wall surface. Again, the applicant countered that previously. I'm simply quoting from the guidelines that I have to base my assessments. They state that in the district, 1/4 of the exterior wall surface is typical for windows, while the proposed window openings currently comprise about 1/2 of the surface of the exterior walls. Based upon the relevant design guidelines, and I'm talking now about size, scale, structure, and the solids to voids, the current proposal for the 6-story structure is inappropriate for the immediate streetscape and more generally for the district. And that is best illustrated by the photo montages on the final drawing sheet that has the title Street Context. If you could scroll maybe on the screen to the very last. I'm sorry, Donnie, I thought you were there. For the benefit of the HCC, it'll be the very last drawing sheet in the packet. Appropriate design solution would be limited to 3 or 4 stories tall, conceivably with an additional 5th floor level if it was significantly set back, and oftentimes we suggest about 12 feet is the appropriate setback from the front facade to avoid perception from the street level below, while the contributing structures nearby offer ample examples of the appropriate relationship between solid walls to window voids. The relevant design guidelines continue by referencing such important issues as rhythm and patterns, window and door openings, materials and textures, architectural details, etc. Though conceived as one structure, the overall building mass shifts in materiality from dark brown brick to dark metal panels as the front facade sets back at the upper floor levels and also as the building turns the corner along Webster Street. Each facade also includes the east facade also includes decorative metal screening at the entry level, while the west facade has an applied stucco. According to the relevant design guidelines, brick and stucco are appropriate facade materials. However, the proposed metal panels and the decorative screens require clarification. Again, I don't have a reference to those in the guidelines, so we just require discussion about those. And then if HCC does determine those to be appropriate, we would expect a subsequent review of product submittals before final approvals. As previously stated, the proposed rhythm and pattern of the punch windows are contemporary in style. Design guidelines note that windows should be functionally similar to and have similar muttons and grid patterns, as well as express sills and lintels of the neighborhood's historic buildings. So the current windows, according to those guidelines, are inappropriate. The relevant design guidelines also depict design components of appropriate storefronts. Again, we had this 2 projects ago, the same designer, where they have a delineation of storefronts that would include a break of the glass at the street level with some kind of an apron. Then you have glazed entrance doors with windows and transoms. Above that would be a sign band, and above that would be some kind of a cornice delineation to help delineate the commercial entry level from the residential floors above. The current storefront proposal is full height plate glass that recess back from the public sidewalk and are interrupted by an arcade of brick piers, along with the lack of any lower apron. They also don't have an upper sign band, and there's no cornice. So according to our design guidelines, they are inappropriate. In addition, the intended door locations for access into the entry-level commercial space are not indicated on the provided drawings. If it needs further development, we would recommend that the entrance doors be located on the sidewalk along East 3rd Street and not around the corner. So the floor plans don't indicate doors, and from the drawings, it's a little, I couldn't really determine where an entrance door would be. So we prefer the entrances into the storefront or storefronts to be from the main facade, which will be the top facade we're seeing here. If the proposed 6-story structure is determined appropriate by HCC following a discussion with the applicant, subsequent review should address in more detail such items as proposed window and door types, window sills and lintels, cornice profiles and various facade materials, as well as any kind of visible exterior illumination. The applicant should be aware that tinted, colored, or reflective glazing is inappropriate. The applicant should also reference the specific guidelines for storefronts while finalizing components and details of the storefronts. And similarly, there are guidelines for signage which offer suggestions for building signage concepts. It's better to incorporate sign concepts now in the process. Otherwise, you'll be faced down the road with every time you have a tenant turnover, you have a new sign concept, a new proposal, et cetera. So it's good to be kind of in control of the sign, not design of the sign, but plan for signage now rather than have the tenant force it on you. And there are specific guidelines for signage within the city's resources.
Okay, thank you, Jeffrey. Well, I suspect the main thing we're going to have to wrap our heads around tonight is the number of stories and the height. And, you know, maybe you could help us along by talking about that.
Yeah, so absolutely, you know, like Jeff, you was saying the height, it's not appropriate. That's not true. There's a lot of buildings in the historical map that is higher than that building, and you know, specifically the one next door, Goodman Building. It's only 3 floors, but it's actually 52 feet high. You know, so those buildings could be, you know, smaller in the number of floors, but they are higher buildings. There are a total of I counted of 11 buildings. It's in the historical map that's higher than this building. That's not including all the churches, all the steeples and all that. And you can see the gentleman before us, he go an even higher building. So I think what we're asking here, it's not improper at all. And special right next to that Rite Aid, that's empty space, and I think the building is going to be well fit for that area. And actually, we have a drawing to the building on the left here. I don't know where we don't have the height here, but that steeple there, it's go to almost the 5th floor, 4.5. So those buildings are definitely taller than the regular 8-foot height floor to floor.
Well, I think it does help you that the building is, you know, on a corner, so it's not sandwiched in between other buildings like many others on the street.
Yeah, if I may.
Yeah, please.
Yeah. We you know, we did pull up the model and inserted the building in Google Earth, and respectfully taking issue from the statement that we were strategically just looking at the taller buildings, we're looking at it from every angle. And as I'm actually pulling up these images here, I have a hard time finding out where the building is, because part of it is not just the massing, but the way it breaks down into a series of other buildings. So I'd like to refer to those. I think there's one that actually is with the background of the taller buildings in the Lehigh, which is the first one. But if you see there, which, let me see if I can laser point through, but I'll show you if I may. Stop me if it's not. But this is the location of the building right here. So, the idea, when you look at the building, it seems like a collection of buildings because there is an area here that steps down and there's another element here and the building sits in here. And yes, these are some of the other tall buildings, and some, as were noted, are non-contributing, but it definitely, the height of the building on Adams and 4th Street is actually higher in itself. This is another view from the Greenway looking at all of the shorter buildings. And again, here we see the building relative to the massing of it. If we look at the other views, this is the building relative to the other lower buildings in this area. But even those other lower buildings, as Mr. Avisal had mentioned, because the building steps down, the line here is at 58, and the height of some of these buildings, like that one, is at 52. So it really sort of is consistent with the up and down and the more kind of varying kind of heights of the building. And here I have to even look at my iPad to find the darn thing. It's right here. And again, I think that the one thing is that I think helps the case is that it's not a solid block, but it's really carved. And that is actually one of the things that is mentioned in the various guidelines for historic districts, that the old ones, but even the new ones that were showing that building was not contributing, of the idea of setbacks and being able to break that massing in there. And also the width of it. So, that's related to the issue of the building height and massing. The building is 6 stories, which is consistent with a lot of the other things that are in the neighborhood by way of height and even newer projects. So we feel that, that it will not be a building that feels like, whoa, what's in here? It's inappropriate. It just breaks the norm, and the scale feels wrong.
Thank you. Any questions or comments from commission members here?
Yeah, I have a question. So, I think we all kind of agree that the demolition of the non-contributing building is really not a non-factor. So we'll just talk about the project. But so the building is completely stepped back. I should say the top floor is completely stepped back.
Yeah, let me see a floor plan that describes it. If we see the plan that has the floor plans, the 4 yellow kind of.
Yeah.
As the building comes up, there are setbacks that are in the site, and then further setbacks. So what you see here in white are the areas where the building has been set back. So it as it goes up, it keeps stepping back up, and that is what's seen in the profile. If you may, to the building above. Well, not that one. Maybe. Well, in the elevations, right? So that we see setbacks here. That this is the height of the 52 building,
Yep.
And the width of a building that is across the street. So it's sort of that sense. And then there's a balcony there or a roof terrace, and then it steps back up here, and then steps back further, and the same thing here. So it has a whole series of step backs that, together with the change in color and the dimension of the setbacks and the face, kind of are respectful of the way that the other buildings sort of create this rhythm of smaller elements on the site. So it's not one big element.
Because I'm looking at a drawing that I think was submitted today.
Yeah, Today, we,
Some elevations on it.
yeah, there was a request for a more head-on.
Correct.
Right.
The reason I'm looking at it is because where you have in the north elevation, where it appears to be the highest portion of the building on the, I guess, the property line, for lack of a better term, is 58 feet 6 inches.
Correct.
And-
Yeah, to the parapet.
Right, to the parapet. And in the top floor, or the top 10 feet then steps back.
So there,
The Rocky, just in terms of what you stated earlier, actually the Goodman Building's 55 feet. 55 feet high. So I do find that right in line if you're going to step the top floor back to give that differential of the height.
yeah, so there are three heights, and I'm looking here on my cheat sheet in my iPad that there's a height of 48 at this level.
Right.
Then there's a height of 56 here, and then the height of 60, it's a 65 with the parapet, 68 here. So it's a
58
whole
appears
series
to
of
be
heights.
the height of the building, and then with the top 10 feet step back. So that's kind of what I was getting at, is that falls in line to what we, I shouldn't say what is compatible with the south side, that we step the top floor back when it goes above that, or in that 50 to 60 foot area.
Yeah, and in the newer drawing that we sent today, this building is head on,
Right.
and that building doesn't look as little as it does there because it's in perspective.
No, it's
And yeah, but if I'm allowed, I can come up with the iPad so you can see that drawing.
I have it.
Oh, you have it? Okay.
Jeff doesn't get it.
She's getting it.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
I just sent it today, so if it's late, it's my
Okay.
fault.
And the reason of
Yeah.
all that stepping
Yeah,
is
I have it. Oh, wait, do I? Let me see.
That's it.
No.
Yes, okay, good. Thank you.
Is it this one?
Scale, yes, it's to scale.
Yeah. And,
Yeah.
So the
you
one
know,
on the screen is not to scale.
Okay.
yeah, the point was that, like, because this was at an angle, the photo was at an angle, it makes that building look kind of puny compared to the height. So the other one is a head-on view that shows that the height of that building is really matching the height of that lower element that steps back. So it doesn't look so jarring in reality, we
I
think.
apologize, Jeff. I didn't know you had it. I'm referencing the picture that I didn't know you didn't have. But
Yeah.
and the reason for all that stepping, if you close to the building, you see it, 4, 5 floors. Really, the 5th floor is the height as a Goodman building. To see the 6th floor, you have to be far away, like a 3-4 block away, to pay attention to see if you can see
Yeah.
it.
And
So,
and the other thing, if I may, is that because this is a head-on view, you see the height of the building, but in reality, if you're on the street, you don't see what's behind because you're at an angle.
What is the depth of the, how far in are the windows recessed? What's the depth of that hole? Is it a foot? Is it 6 inches?
We're looking to give it some depth, like 6 inches or something, so that there's a sense of really of depth and a solidity to the brick facade, so that it's not something that's like slapped on or and also to give it a sense of these kind of strong shadows, and we're inspired there by buildings like the Steel General Building or some of the other buildings that the one, I forget the name of the one near the McDonald's, that is on the corner, that are that color masonry, that are deep windows.
Right.
And I think that the sense of shadow, a lot of times you look at the buildings and it may look great in elevation, but I call them shrink wrap because while they look historic, they're very flat and they don't have that sense of the character of the brick.
One of the things that was prominent with painting Victorians was to paint them in one color and rely on the shadows that would develop with the dentils, crowns and dentils and corbels and so on, to create the visual impact. So I'm assuming that that's the kind of thing you're looking to tackle here.
and the depth of that, it's 6 inch, like Tony will say, because we're planning to using the full brick and really to make those return to be something south. That's why we need that 6 inch. So I get the feedback you guys have early of those IFI system and all that. I'm not too big of a fan of that myself. Really looking to see a hard material so they can last here for quite a while. That's why we're planning to step it back 6 inch to use a full brick and, some kind of metal panels so they can be there for years.
Where would you propose the opening or the main door to the storefront?
No,
Would it be
we
on
just
the
didn't draw them
third
because of, I guess we were thinking of the flexibility, but clearly, like to the comment of the officer, they have to be on 3rd Street.
Okay.
And ideally in the corner or, and yeah.
Okay.
If I might, Antonio, that the office, the restaurant office space, we don't have a tenant yet, but like them to access for 3rd Street and all the residents to access for the side street, Hyman.
Yeah, down this way.
Yeah. That one, backing out as well. Really believe it's a good fit for an area. In my opinion, it's gonna bring more people in the area. That those businesses they are screaming for people there, especially over the pandemic. So I think design and economic is going to be a good fit for a city. So.
Well, it's certainly a very dynamic design, and I think most of us here really appreciate just the quality and the sophistication of it, and the materials too. So I'll tell you, I gotta be honest. I think what differentiates this project from the one, Antonio, you brought before us, just earlier. While on that one we had approved a taller building, I thought it was very interesting the way you split up the facades and you found some alignments with the neighbors next door. I think what is different about this submission is, we're on a part of 3rd Street where almost everything is 3 stories on both sides of the street for quite a ways. And, I feel that based on our design guidelines, and, I could point out to you where in our design guidelines it talks about this, but, if I just go to page 9 of our design guidelines, and there's pretty clear diagrams showing massing of that works and massing that doesn't. And believe me, I hear everything you're saying, and I think there's a lot of great things about the project, but we're just in a part of the neighborhood where the buildings are primarily 3 stories tall, and I think that's why this is not working quite as well.
I agree with you. They're primarily 3-story floor, but the height it says otherwise.
Well,
so
I mean, I'll sort of my honest take about it is, and I'll respectfully differ from that in that if one were to imagine that building being 3 stories and being a block, I think that the fact that the building is broken into components and that there has a varying cornice, if you were to take that same building and say, okay, let's make it 3 stories and it's all brick and it's all solid, because of its width and its frontage, it would stand out more than a building that, in a way, frankly, is sort of camouflage or is modulated so that when you look at the facade, you see it coming in and out. And I think that, in our sense, when we did these views, it comes through, right? That you don't see a big block of a building, but you see something that appears like a collection of 3 buildings, and it looks more
absolutely
like it grew through time and more organic. And we think that doing that and the quality of the brick and the character of the depth of the facade and all these other elements would really make it a very fitting addition to this area, and not really sort of stick out like a sore thumb,
I think it would probably work even better if the parts of the facade that were actually on the street were expressed themselves as 3 stories and similar cornice heights. And I agree, breaking up the building and using setbacks. I even heard Jeffrey say that would be an appropriate approach. I hope that's something you could, explore a little bit more, I should say. I mean, yeah, you've definitely explored it, but when I look at this East 3rd Street elevation, it looks like a 4-story building joined to a 5-story building with a 6-story building behind it. And you know, understood, you know, we all know, yeah, they're flat elevations, and, you know, that's probably not the way it's going to be perceived. But, you know, I don't think, I still think that it needs the you know, it needs the roof line right at the sidewalk face to be more in keeping with our, with the context of other buildings on that part of 3rd Street. So again, just my opinion.
Yeah,
Gary, I'd like to just mention that I really like the breaking up of this project. It looks great the way it is, and it would look really great if it was at least 2 stories lower. And it was still broken up like that. If you take the top 2 stories off of it and you break down, now it's 4 and 3 stories high. Now it fits the neighborhood. It fits the rhythm of the neighborhood beautifully.
And Seth, with your years of experience on this commission, would you say that's based on our design guidelines?
Absolutely. That's why. That's why I voted against the 9-story building. Yes.
I would.
Go ahead. No, go ahead.
Like, I'm
Okay,
sure you
so-
said something more.
So, no, I don't know. I mean, I guess it depends on the perspective of which way you look down 3rd Street. Because according to what I'm looking at, the Goodman, if you look west, the Goodman building matches this height. And then 2 blocks away, you have 2 buildings that are over 80 feet tall on the corner of 3rd and South New Street.
If we may put the aerial views, that might, yeah, I guess that's any of those, or even the next 2, you know, that, I mean, you see there that there's a richness in the variety and the scale and the ups and downs of the buildings, and building, I mean, essentially camouflages itself because of this breaking down. You know, we'd be happy to explore. By the way, these windows line up. Like you have made that comment about the prior one, so at least we got that right. But
right,
not knocking the other one.
Right.
But but what I'm saying is that we'd be happy to come back and then look at the materials of the brick, and that I think that we wouldn't have to knock down the floors to see that the building could have a visually lower profile, so that maybe the fact that the brick comes up to the top floor, but not the very top floor, they could actually come down more, so that the height of that brick element on the corner could be come down, and we could come up with some of these other studies. But I think that, you know, it's really no secret that the ability of getting sufficient value for the building also helps the kind of quality materials that we can use in here. And hopefully he can notarize that he's not going to use EFIS on the building and put that in there so the architect doesn't have to deal with EFIS. But I think it's important to be able to do something that I think is really within the realm of other things that are happening there, but then allow for the level of architectural quality so that you can have a building that has the proper depth and the quality of materials. And I think it's really the quality, in my mind, that always distinguishes a historic building from a modern building, you know, where they were giving modern day architects the chore of dealing with economies that are excruciating. You know, all of the buildings here are built for time, and they look solid, and they look, and I think that's a character that we always want to capture, you know.
Absolutely.
So I'd rather have a building that's 1 story taller and real brick than something that's lower, but then somehow it looks like what I call a shrink wrap building, you know, that looks historic in elevation, but in reality, they always fall short of having the you know, the texture, the shadows of historic buildings.
Well, you know, because it's about 8:30, I'm going to ask if it's okay with everyone here if we see if there's anyone from the public who'd like to comment. Is that okay with the commission members? Just please come up, Kim.
I think I'm the only member of or only person from the South Side who's still here. So My name is Kim Carroll Smith. I live at 833 Carlton Avenue. And I just want to say I do really appreciate the use of setbacks and differentiation. I think that's exciting. And it's something, that we didn't used to see a lot of, and now we're getting more ideas. And I think that one of the things that a number of us in the South Side have said about this particular proposal is we're grateful that you considered the Mechanic Street side of things because that's the back of the building, but you made it look like it's a real building, not just sort of big blank wall or sort of a fake wall or fake windows or something. So people are mildly excited about that part of the design, but I think the most comments, and of course I'm going to speak here for myself at this point, but I have to say there are a lot of people who wish they were commenting tonight. I wanted to echo Mr. Cornish's comments because I think there's promise in the style of the building, and you could talk more about that, and no doubt you will, and I hope you'll table this and be able to have those continued discussions. But I really do think the building is too high, and I know the Goodman building is down there, but if you look at that stretch on the right side of the street, as you look at that last picture and you're looking down 3rd Street, that is one of our most intact streetscapes of historic structures. That is the charm of South Bethlehem, and it's the eclectic sort of excitement of South Bethlehem where there are lots of stores and things. 4th Street also has a stretch of that, but it's not as big. And there aren't as many stores there that really are compelling to outsiders as well as folks in town, to be honest. So it's really important what goes there in that corner. And I think it is a corner, which is great. So maybe 5 stories works. But the idea of going up higher is really, it looms over the street. And it doesn't just loom over the street, but it also takes over the sidewalk in its current design. And I appreciate that what you're thinking about it with that sort of airy stuff in the shadows. But I also would say, as a pedestrian, I would ask people about that. I would ask some South Bethlehem people what they think about having a section of the sidewalk like that to walk through. I just don't know if that's that inviting, and I don't know if aesthetically it's what we want to see on our street because of, I think maybe Mr. Later's the one who said, if you look at across the street, there's a sidewalk there, and you look down the rest of it, there's a sidewalk. Yep. So I think those are the main things I just wanted to say. I also hope that you'll get a shadow drawing because of the historic stuff that's around there and what it will be sort of potentially shadowing. I have no idea what that would look like.
Could I make a clarifying comment?
Sure.
Yeah. So I want to assure you that we're not building over the sidewalk, and
Okay.
that what's actually being done is because we were very intent on having the building also become a gateway and continue the permeability and the connection between the greenway.
Mhm.
Is that it's actually creating an arcade because the sidewalk there is really quite narrow, so that people can more easily access the greenway and that area. So we were not building over the.
On the 3rd Street side?
We're not building. If we come over to the image, exactly there. The sidewalk is the sidewalk's intent. So what you're seeing here is really under the building is making that wider so that it's easier for somebody to go in and make it inviting. So if you go to the image above, if you may, what we're doing there is that the sidewalk is still there, but we're carving an arcade so that it's easier for people to really engage it. And
I realize it's there. It's just that the way it sort of comes down at the street is what I was commenting about.
All right.
That the sidewalk is now within your structure as opposed to being sort of free out of the
it
structure.
is, right. I don't know if I'm misunderstanding, but the sidewalk is there as
Yes.
it is now. So what we're doing is extending the sidewalk into the building to create a colonnade.
Okay, because one of the renderings doesn't show it that way. It looks
Yeah.
like it goes right down to the curb.
Yeah, if we go to the plan, if we may again. So this is the existing sidewalk.
Okay.
And the building is always outside of the sidewalk. So what we're doing is moving that area there so that the sidewalk appears even wider.
Thank you.
And you can sort of go in there. So I just want to make sure
That's helpful. Yeah, because the other picture looked
interpreted
like-
that we're actually building on the sidewalk.
Right.
Because I don't think it's even permitted.
Well, that's what I wondered. So thank you. Thank you for clarifying that. Thanks.
Is there anyone else from the public who'd like to comment on this? Yes, sir. Please come up. And please announce your name for us again.
Yeah, Bill Shire, 1890 Eaton Avenue. My comment is very brief. I find the building to be too big, too plain, and too repetitive. And that's also my comment on the Boys and Girls Club coming up later because I have to go. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, too. If there is not any more comments from the public, is there any other questions or comments from the commission? I think we're at the point where we really need to have a motion for this. And what I am going to, yeah, sure, go ahead.
So I think we keep getting caught up in stories, and it may just be height that's the issue relative to this particular project, where if you look at this project and it's, like I said, very close to what the Goodman, which was approved, is in between the Goodman and this project is really more non-contributing buildings with the Rite Aid. There is no, with all due respect to the public, there's no continuous contributing buildings along that structure, along that side of the street. It goes from what is proposed here to the Goodman. So I just want to be clear with that there's nothing that's, you know what I mean, in between the two actually contributing historically. This potentially one and the Goodman.
Yeah.
I know.
Okay. Well, my feeling is that if I made a motion right now, I think I would tend to want to table it if you feel that if you're feeling you're set on this design, I think I would make a motion to deny.
I mean, table for what reason? The height?
Right. So I think we need to make
a building
right.
the same height all the way around. There's a gentleman, he would have higher building was approved. I mean, I don't see the height as you show. Yeah, maybe we can come back later to show you, sample of bricks what we're gonna use.
I think we beat this issue, so I think what you need from us is some direction.
Some direction I need for the height and demolition of the building.
Okay.
That's the two main things. If
I
we
mean,
have,
respectfully, again, using that word a lot today, but I mean it. But I never encountered, and I've been at this for a long time. I never encountered a place where the building is zoned for a certain height, and the request is so drastically different than that. And sometimes there'd be other bodies that rule and so on, but this is really it's zoned for 150 feet height.
Right.
This is a height that's half than that, and there's ample precedent in even a project that we were looking at today for structure that is lower. So this doesn't even come close to the infamous case in Philadelphia, Jewelry Row, where the Jewelry Row was a historic district designated, but the height said that you could build a 300-story building, and sure enough, they demolished all those buildings and destroyed Jewelry Row to put a 40-story tower. We're talking about something that is really commensurate. So I just find it that I don't see the the controlling legal authority, the mechanism by which.
Yeah, I'll explain one more time just to make it perfectly clear. We have design guidelines, page 9. We have a stretch of 3rd Street where for several blocks the buildings are predominantly 3 stories. And that's why I personally feel, based on these design guidelines and based on Secretary of Interior Standard 9, that although I personally like the design of your building, I just feel the height and number of stories is not appropriate as it stands right now. So I'm going to make that a motion. And if anyone would like to second me on that, please go ahead.
So I have a question before you do that.
Okay.
So you're to make a motion. We're still talking about the demolition of this building too. So if your motion includes the demolition and the height and everybody votes no, that's a no on the demolition as well. So
Yeah,
can't we
that's
have
correct.
2 motions, one for the demolition of the building and one for the height?
Yeah, we've talked about this before, and our motion for demolition is really tied into what's being approved.
I didn't see that, and I'm not as familiar,
Yeah.
obviously, with the guidelines as all of you are, but I didn't see that anywhere where it didn't say you couldn't bifurcate the two issues.
In addition to that, anytime we allow demolition, it's only with a set of approved construction drawings that Mike Simonson has in hand. So, we really have to approve what's being proposed in conjunction with demolition. And let me remind you too, again, we are a recommending board. We're charged with a very simple task. We interpret our design guidelines for a specific project, and we make a recommendation to City Council. Anyway,
Excuse me.
Yes.
If I can remind the commission, the last time there was a recommendation against a certificate that was sent to City Council without specificity on the changes that would be incorporated to see an approval, it was sent back to the commission. So before
Absolutely
you,
right, Alicia.
I'm sorry?
You're absolutely right, Alicia.
Yeah, and so before you finish your motion, I want to remind you of a couple of things. There's a 60-day time frame in which you need to act on these. There is 2 things on the table, and as you stated, the condition of approval of the subsequent building, while important, is really something that rests with the permit office, and they will not issue it, whether or not this body, when the body places a condition on approval, whether there's a replacement project or not, we cannot issue the permits. That's just the way it is when a certificate of appropriateness is issued by council on a demolition that has the provision in it that it'd be contingent on the replacement structure. So I respectfully disagree, Gary, with your comments about not being able to do that. I do believe that you can, and I think we've shared that in past projects with you guys on that. But before finishing that recommendation, I strongly encourage you to provide very specific, not just I think it should be lower, very specific guidance to this applicant. And you must hear him say he cannot do that. If you review the ordinance, you need to indicate what those changes would result in a positive recommendation.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, and you're absolutely right. So I'd like to add to my motion that I would like to see for us to grant a certificate of appropriateness that the roof height and number of stories, at least at the street side, is consistent with the predominant height and number of stories of adjacent structures, at least within, the block or two. And if you're willing to come back to us, the setbacks, as we mentioned, we're okay with an additional story that is set back. And I think there's elements of your design that I think we could buy into, but I think that's the main thing we would like to see.
But to which building you're trying to make the headline. Across the street is a Hooker Lounge, 1-story building. Next door, it's a Goodman building. It's 55 feet. The gentleman before us, it's 90-some feet. To which one? So
yeah,
I don't think so. The height it's not appropriate. The height it's fitting that neighborhood, and that's why we break them apart. You can see it at the 4th floor. It's fitting the one across. The 5th floor, it's a fitting on the Goodman building. The 6th floor, it's totally hiding.
Sir, we.
So I don't.
Sir, we've heard what you're saying, and right now I have a motion on the table, and I'm just looking for someone to second it.
And sorry, what was that motion again?
My motion is to deny a certificate of appropriateness for 128 East 3rd Street based on Secretary of Interior Standard number 9 and our design ordinance, because the predominant height and number of stories in that part of the neighborhood is 3 stories, and that we would consider a certificate of appropriateness if the building design was represented to us in consideration of that 3 stories, at least at the front, at least at the facades on East Third Street and Webster Street, and that we would consider additional stories if the setback was appropriate.
For clarification, might it be appropriate to read the number 9 of the Secretary Interior Standards?
Sure, would you
I
like
thought
me
I
to-
knew them by memory, but could somebody read that? Is that?
Sure, I'll read it for you.
Yeah.
New additions,
Thank
exterior alterations, or related new construction will not destroy historic materials, features, and spatial relationships that characterize the property. The new work shall be differentiated from the old and will be compatible with historic materials, features, size, scale, and proportion, and massing to protect the integrity of the property and its environment.
Gary, I'll second your motion.
Okay, thank you, Seth. Let's go to a vote. Craig Evans.
Nay.
Okay, Seth Cornish.
Aye.
Roger Hudak.
Nay.
Ken Lausch.
Nay.
Okay, I vote aye. Mike Simonson.
Nay.
Okay, and Chaz Patrick.
Hey,
Okay, so my motion doesn't carry, and that's fine. We just need someone to make a new motion then.
So what are we charged with at this point? New
No,
motion?
we did not pass a motion to deny. So we're
So we need either a motion to table or a motion to recommend a.
to recommend a COA. Table, right. So it'd be a recommendation for a COA then.
Right.
So, give it a shot of here. I'll make the recommendation for approval of this certificate of appropriateness for the project at 128 East 3rd Street, I'm sorry. Including the demolition of the existing non-contributing structure and construction of the proposed 6-story commercial building with a roof height of 68 feet 6 inches. All design aspects of the building, material wise and other things to come back at a later date. I'm done.
I'll second it.
Okay, thank you, Chaz. Okay, we'll take a vote. Craig Evans.
Aye.
Seth Cornish.
Nay.
Roger Hudak.
Aye.
Ken Lausch.
Aye.
Vote nay. Mike Simonson.
Aye.
And Chaz Patrick.
Aye.
Okay, so this motion carries, 7 to 2. I'm sorry, 5 to 2.
Last one.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, and we will be sure to come back and address the concerns of everybody at the table, and make sure that it's something that you're all comfortable in the final product. So I appreciate the discussion.
Yeah, so next time you appear, it'll be with the samples and
Yeah.
and the remainder of the, okay.
And I think some of the other things that we discussed about the cornice and appearing to lower the height, we'll definitely take them to heart, so.
Okay, the boys club. I wonder how they look at a rent already.
Yeah,
Apartments. How much are they gonna cost?
well, we submitted it to the city, and I'm sorry it came late, so I took responsibility for that, and yeah,
No,
I'm sorry about that.
just, I think we're trying to be responsive. I forwarded Gary's request for information.
Yeah, but it was my fault that it came in the day before, or this morning. So.
Okay, so we are now at our last item for the evening, 117 East 4th Street. Again, I'm recusing myself from this one, and Craig, if you could take over.
Jeffrey?
Well, let's get you another one because it's hard enough to hear us.
I don't know. I didn't see any in there. I usually keep them there, but I didn't see any.
Don't mean you have to do everything around here.
He needs no sticking card, right?
Go ahead.
117 East 4th Street. The building description, period, style, and defining features. This structure is a 1.5-story recreational building with split-face block walls and metal panel siding with a low-pitched gabled roof with similar metal panel side. So the roof and the upper portions have similar metal panel cladding. The building was constructed in the late 20th century, is contemporary in style, and is considered non-contributing to the Historic Conservation District because it was constructed after the district's period of significance, which is 1895 to 1950, when South Bethlehem experienced dramatic development. Proposed alterations, it is proposed to demolish the existing single-story building or 1.5-story building and construct a 7-story mixed-use building with a lower-level parking garage. The citations I used, a repeat from previous ones, include Secretary of Interior Standards number 9. Excuse me just a moment. Concerning new construction, the Bethlehem ordinance that Mr. Later read at the beginning of the meeting, and the Conservation District guidelines concerning new construction. I've referenced those previously concerning such thing as size and scale, proportion, rhythm and patterns, windows and doors, materials and textures, architectural detailing, shapes and massing, as well as streetscapes. And then finally, the specific design guidelines for storefronts. My evaluation and recommendations. The certificate of appropriateness application indicates the intent to demolish the existing structure and replace it with a new commercial and residential building. The accompanying drawing sheets depict the proposed replacement as a multi-story mixed-use building measuring 140 feet wide by 160 feet deep. The central portion of the proposed development project measures 63 feet wide, rises 7 stories tall, and measures 80 feet high at the front or south facade, and has no mechanical pit house. The rear facade facing the greenway is 12 feet deeper due to the pitch of the project site. A 3-story wing addition measuring approximately 38 feet wide by 63 feet deep by 42 feet high flanks the west side of the main structure, while a similar 3-story wing addition measuring approximately 38 feet wide, 63 feet deep, and 36 feet high flanks the east side of the main structure. They weren't labeled, so I didn't know what to call them, so sorry if I'm just calling the main structure and left east wing and west wing. The proposed, thank you so much. Perfect. The proposed entry level includes approximately 2,700 square feet of commercial space, centrally located at the front or south facade, with the remaining square footage dedicated to the parking garage entrance, support spaces for residential tenants, as well as several living units. The proposed upper floor levels include a mix of studio, 1-bedroom, and 2-bedroom apartments for an overall total of 70 units, with an amenity lounge and attached terrace at the third floor level, along with private side terraces and rooftop terraces accessed from select units. The provided drawings also indicate below-grade basement/cellar level that accommodates 34 parking spaces. As previously stated, the existing recreational building is non-contributing to the district due to its construction after the period of significance for the district. Therefore, the request for HEC to approve demolition is predicated on the applicant's ability to replace the lost building with a new structure that satisfies various Secretary of Interior standards as well as relevant design guidelines concerning size, scale, massing, and proportions. The current design proposal fills the void left by the demolished structure, which is appropriate. The guidelines continue by noting, and I've stated this previously, quote, new construction should reflect the dominant cornice and roof heights of the adjacent buildings and proportions of the building elements to one another and to the streetscape. And if large-scale construction is considered, particular attention must be given to the effect of the proposed building on the streetscape and to the district as a whole, end quote. Although recently renovated as living units, the existing structures west of the project site, so in the drawing up on the screen and in your packet, I'm assuming, looks like page 5. So the proposal is kind of centered in the block to the left. It was recently renovated and is currently referred to as the Brinker Lofts. They were originally utilitarian in nature, so the individual floor heights are taller than typical residential construction. So if you kind of squint your eyes, you can see that those floor heights of those 3 levels are taller than even kind of traditional residential structures within the district. It's residential now, but it previously was not. The peak of the gabled roof of that structure is approximately 68 feet. I'm using that based on the provided drawings. I didn't go measure it myself. And the peak of the adjacent shorter structure is approximately 45 feet. However, the guidelines reference the cornice, the dominant cornice height, and based again on the same drawings, the cornice height of the larger corner building seems to be around 55 feet. And the smaller structure appears, the cornice seems to be about 35 feet. Existing structure at the east of the project site, so on the other end of the block, again, that represents both ends of the block with the proposal in between. That's currently the Holy Infancy School. It retains the original institutional use, and typically institutional buildings have, just because of its nature, taller floor-to-ceiling heights than residential construction. And here we indeed see that. It's 3 or 4, depending on how you count it, 3 or 4 levels. The cornice height, it's a flat roof, so it has an obvious cornice height at around 50 feet. In that drawing, they pull out a detail that pops up over the cornice, but the overall cornice line is defined by the guidelines. It's the lower portion, again, that terminates around 50 feet. Buildings at the city block corners within the historic district are often taller, and that was one of the arguments the applicant just made for his previous submittal, was that's a corner building, and so oftentimes those corner buildings are taller than buildings within the block, and that helps to kind of anchor, we call it, anchor the corner. So the cornice dimensions of the appropriate new infill construction typically would not exceed those. They would either be met with it or perhaps go below that. So the side wings of the current design appropriately refrain from exceeding those heights, and we can see it very much in the drawing. It begins to mimic the pattern of the rest of the block, where you see the cornice heights undulating with the tallest cornice heights anchored on either corner. So the wings, I'll call them, on either side of the main structure are appropriate in the fact that they do respect those defined cornice lines. However, the main central portion of the design proposal measures 80 feet tall and therefore is considered inappropriate because it exceeds the cornice heights of the adjacent contributing structures. The current assessment should also consider the rear facade. So there in the drawing on the screen, that will be the lower drawing. In reality, this building has 2 fronts, one that fronts the street and one that fronts the greenway. That facade is 12 feet taller because of the pitch of the site, meaning that at that elevation, it's no longer 80 feet tall, but rather 92 feet tall, as perceived from the adjacent greenway. The siting of the proposed project is due south from the greenway, which also would result in long shadows cast out over the greenway during significant portions of each day. The design guidelines continue, those are not referenced in the guidelines, those are just observations. The building is south of the greenway, hence it will cast a shadow. A 92-foot tall building would obviously cast a fairly significant shadow over the greenway. The design line guidelines continue, and we've heard this before, that new construction facades should have similar proportions of solids and voids. The floor-to-ceiling windows of the current design proposal, like we've seen previously with the same designer, are contemporary and do not relate to the voids and solids of the district, and you see that plainly, especially in the upper drawing. You see the existing conditions. Here, the windows of the existings are darkened, and then you see the red brick of the existing, and you see almost the opposite effect of the proposal. So based upon those design guidelines, the current proposal for a 7-story structure is inappropriate for the immediate streetscape. It does have appropriate components, and I've tried my best to reference those. I'm not saying that everything is inappropriate. And more generally for the overall district. An appropriate design solution would be limited. In this case, if you see that even though they are 3 stories, they're actually tall, quite tall stories, and they fit within the confines of the cornices. So theoretically, a 4-story structure that would still adhere to those cornice lines could function, and even a 5th floor, if it was significantly set back from the front and rear facades, in order to avoid the perception from the street or from the greenway. Nearby structures offer plenty of examples for appropriate relationships between solid and void. The relevant design guidelines continue by referencing such important issues as rhythm and patterns, windows and door openings, materials and textures, as well as architectural details and streetscapes. Building elements of this design shift in materiality from red brick to gray brick as the front facade steps back at the upper floor levels, and also as the building recesses at the east wing. According to the relevant design guidelines, red brick is appropriate. Gray brick, we don't really see much, although there are a couple of opportunities sprinkled here and there, and the applicant referenced one of those in the previous application. So that simply just warrants discussion from the commission. Guidelines continue that windows, and we've heard before, should be functionally similar to those nearby, and we see windows of the nearby structures, and there's very little, if any, relationship between the proposed windows and the windows of the buildings within the existing streetscape. Like the previous application, the current design also has a shift in the vertical window alignments. Sometimes the windows align, and then at a certain point, I think it's a little hard to see, but I think between the 2nd and 3rd floor, there's a shift in that alignment. Again, that is considered based on the guidelines as inappropriate. It's a little hard at this scale to understand the details of the storefront, so I'm not going to repeat the whole guideline statements about storefronts. I would just like to have some clarification from the applicant if the proposal includes typical storefront components like the apron, the transoms, the sign band, and the cornice that delineates the storefront level from the residential levels above. If the proposed 7-story structure is determined appropriate by HCC following their discussion with the applicant, subsequent review should address in more detail such items as the proposed window and door types, window sills and lintels, which in my opinion, if I can tell, maybe in the side additions, I'm not really sure, don't seem to be there. Any kind of cornice profiles, which again, I don't really see any cornices, as well as any kind of visible exterior illumination. The applicant should be aware that tinted, colored, and reflective glazing is inappropriate, and the applicant is encouraged to reference the specific guidelines for storefronts as well as signage before returning to HCC with more detailed design proposals.
Thank you, Jeffrey. you like to address any of the comments that our historic officer has gone through?
Well, I think this, that just before I'm going to turn it over to Antonio here, this was intentionally designed to harmonize with this block. Some of these windows that are in this proposal mimic the school, and the architecture mimics the school. And while this is one structure, it appears to be three different structures, and it depends how you want to view this. You have a 3-story structure, you have a second 3-story structure. The center structure, the larger, what appears to be 7 stories, is set back, and Antonio can speak to that, but you really have a 2-story structure on the front sidewalk, which you see it. And if you were to average all of these different structures together, forget about stepping back to center. You're talking an average of 4.3 stories for this building when you average them all together. And so, with that being said, Antonio, I'll turn it over to you and with regard to being responsive to what Mr. Long said.
Yeah, I'll concur that more detail is required on the storefront and the sign bands and the apron and the awnings and those elements, and we will. And also to make the windows less ziggy-zaggy and more kind of lined up like they do in the other structures. And also to come with the brick. So I think, again, we like to come back and then show more of that detail and take to heart the comments that were there. But I think that the one thing that it's really about the height, and this is sort of how we approached it, right? And first of all, this is really a beautiful block. I absolutely adore the Brinker Lofts building because it's just has just integrity of the color of the brick and the brick. And it's just really simple. It's punch windows. And the Hawley Infancy School is also a beautiful building. And at some point, it's almost like there's like the jury instructions, right? You should do this and this and that. But then the jury says, okay, but considering other things, so we'll tell you what our thinking was. But as Mr. Benner mentioned, you could take, if I can take the pointer, you could take a 4-story structure and make it taller and create a structure that is really a solid wall here, right? And if you look at the plan, if we may go to the plan there for a moment, we could achieve the same number of units, the same massing. Yeah, that one. Thank you. By saying that the building could come right up to the edge, that it could be like an H-shaped kind of building, and it would be this block. And what we sought there to do was to sculpt this building to, if we may go to the rendering, the last one I believe it is, what we sought to do there is to let that building stand there by itself and have a breather element in here. And we can debate the color of the brick and so on, but do something that is sort of like a garden entry or something. Let that building breathe. Let this building be there, but also pick up on the brick color and keep it lower and then carve it out and then have a recess here that is an entry to let that building breathe, and then take that element and mass it. And rather than have a solid building that would just create a wall and in a way swallow the other two buildings, we said that's one way that we did it, and we can achieve the same number of units. But if you squeeze that out and carve that, not only it allows you to be able to create a more organic, variegated facade that is much more sensitive to these buildings, but on the rear to the greenway, you wouldn't have a wall that is the 4 stories looking at the building, but you have a narrow building, which is the nose of it. And you'd be able to have 2 side gardens that allow you to in a way that you could say that the shadow would be either a longer shadow or a shadow that takes the whole length of it, right? If we go to the plan. And that was really the strategy, right? Because essentially you have the same, you can achieve, rather than having a wall here, you can have a shadow. Actually, we drew the shadow on this one, but otherwise the shadow would go the whole length of it. And then you can create 2 gardens off to the side that open up into the greenway. And what we did essentially was basically say, yeah, you can have this thing. It can be like an H shape. You can put it on the side. You be on the level, but how do you use the recommended element of the setbacks that are in the newer criteria and sculpt it so that you give the buildings off to the side, the two bookend buildings, some breathing space. And I think that what we'd like to do with this building is really actually be incredibly self-effacing, in the sense that it can have very regular windows, and we can work on that. But if we go back to the front elevation, the elevation drawings that were there before, this one is to really sort of create that pattern of punch windows that goes in there to continue the brick, to create the space in there and let that building have integrity, and to then really not create that wall that just kind of consumes the whole block, and that was our approach. And again, we can achieve the same density by squashing everything and doing this H-shaped building that will make the building lower but it really appear much more massive, so that was our thinking on this one. And again, I really do think that relative to the other elements that the officer had mentioned, we can comply, but it seems like the concern is always the height and the appropriateness of the height relative to the massing of the other pieces, right? How the assembly works. Anyway, that's my thing.
Thank you. Comments from the board?
I would just like to add one additional thing. This is not, and I know you don't care about cost. This one is not
our
cheap.
job.
This one's not cheap. And you either want something that's really architecturally special, or you want finishes like in other that you've seen earlier tonight.
I'm not doing it this way.
And nor am I, by the way.
I know.
And so, we really spent some time with this, and I think to Antonio's point here, and he articulated it, in my view, very well, to give that school breathing room, because it has to breathe, because it is a special structure. And the other one, they did a really remarkable job in rehabbing that thing, and it needs some air around it, and it needs to stand on its own and not be crowded. And I just really didn't want to do a big square blob to take the breath away from both corners. And I think this accomplishes it.
The concept to allow those other two structures to be vibrant is, I think, an innovative thought. And I think the idea to adjust the elevations on the new structure is a creative way to approach that. To deal with the elephant always walks in the room. It's height. To deal with that, I still think that the center section could be proud of the other two, but perhaps instead of squashing it into a single block, we just kind of mash it around a little bit so that what comes down a bit from the top goes out to the sides and still allows the older buildings to have their say. I don't know if that is something that you had given any consideration to. Does it have to? How much does it have to be proud in the middle to achieve this? I'm not sure, but I think there may be room for a compromise that is somewhat between a homogeneous block that sits in the middle there and this, which has a significant projection in the middle. I'm just tossing that idea out.
I would just by way of comment, the center massing, on both sides of that center massing is green area. So there are gardens up at that level. And so residents on the fourth floor, for example, will look out onto gardens.
Yeah, one more.
Will look out onto gardens. If I take it up another story, I'm going to be looking at a roof. Those people will be looking at a rooftop. That's why it was at that level.
And I see your point, and you know the analogy that I use when we do these things is it's like those toy balloons that people shape into dogs and whatever, and there's only so much air in them, and then you squeeze one in, and then the other end goes, and at some point, when I'm popping the balloon, you shape it, and I think that the amount of space that is in there is essentially the space that exists in those gardens that Mr. Bennett was mentioning, or the space that would get filled up in the front elevation, right? So that there's just no way it has to go. And then the other thing is that these apartments all have to have windows and light and air and so on. So that from an apartment shaping point of view, the humane thing is to create as much light and air as possible. From a historic point of view, which is really what we're considering here, is what's the most sensitive way of dealing with the integrity of these really beautiful structures on either end of the block. So I think from all our different massing options, we can find a way to squeeze that air of the balloon in a way that wouldn't fill in the courtyard or fill in that whole front facade. That would come in there and just touch the two buildings side to side and just be like, it would just, just be one plane. It wouldn't be like a place that would give those two structures some breathing room.
From a personal standpoint, I'm truly heartened that you had approached the design of this project with keeping those two existing buildings in mind. That's I think that's a really critical approach to the sensitivity to a historic district. And the historic district over the last couple of decades has been important in order, and sufficiently important that people want to develop here. So, we aren't here as the opponent to good development. We're trying to make sure that the concept of the district remains vibrant and respects the history from the period of 1890 to 1950, and that there's a sense of fabric here that you've addressed by looking at the buildings this way. I'd be interested to know if there's any further comment from the board.
I would just say, being the new guy on the board here, I like the project. It looks good. Being there and watching them do the Brinker building, I thought that was a great job. And, I know that the Boys Club's been sitting vacant for a while, and I just think it would be good for the South Side personally.
Comments? Any comments from the public, please?
Hi, I'm still Kim Carroll Smith, and I still live at 833 Carlton Avenue, although I'm beginning to think maybe I live here. I really am excited about this particular block and the idea that the Boys and Girls Club will disappear. And not because it's the Boys and Girls Club. I wish they'd be around having more vibrant presence on the South Side itself, but the building, goodbye. I think it's exciting to think that you got an award-winning, historical rehab job on the Brinker Lofts. That was big time. We've got Holy Infancy, as you said, which is beautiful and meaningful to the community. So this is really an important block. But this is also another important moment to keep considering what your guidelines are, just if I could offer that up, because every time we're talking about new buildings, we're talking about well, we could just bypass the guidelines here, we could bypass the guidelines there. Pretty soon you have no guidelines. There is a proposal in front of the public at this point, and it was in front of one committee of the city council about building heights, but it is not in force right now. So we don't have that. We have a height limit that's huge, but it doesn't apply to the historic district guidelines. The historic district guidelines say to think about things in terms of what's going on in that block, the immediate structures. I think this would be a great building. I agree with Mr. Evans that it would be a great building with those interesting, stepping stones of variegation, because it's not a great huge mass. We've seen what big massive buildings can do, and people don't like them. Speaking as a South Sider, everybody I know doesn't like new buildings that are big and massive when they've seen them. In fact, I've heard some historic conservation district commission members say the same thing. But if you could massage it, if you could do something else, and while I'm sympathetic to the residents' need for gardens, perhaps that's the place for massaging. Perhaps rooftop gardens that they overlook are a good thing. They might not be able to use them quite the same way. I don't know how that works. But the facades are important. The height is important. The streetscapes are important. And if you look at across the street, what there is there, they're houses. This is going to be a huge building across from houses. My other concern, and I think it might be again that I'm maybe misreading the drawing, so I'm asking for some help here, which is, as I look at that back, which is 92 feet tall, which again is like, wow, on the south side. Have you ever seen a 92-foot building around the Greenway? I guess we will soon, but how many of these do we need? So if there's a 92-foot building, and then what I noticed is that 12-foot area at the base, it appears to be not like connected to the Greenway because it's the parking garage. So I was thinking about what Mr. Later said about that earlier building, which was about activating the Greenway. That is there a potential to put in steps, connect it a little bit better, not have to look at just the cars and where they are, but to make it feel a part of the Greenway? Because I think for many of us, the Greenway is probably the most exciting thing that's ever happened at the South Side, and lots of South Side people use it. When we would look at this from the Greenway, we would see you can't get up here, but you can get over here, which reminds me of that building, One Broad Street Plaza. I don't remember the name of the Rockefeller building, downtown on Broad Street, where you have the big wall, and then you can get up there and you have a fine time with restaurants and things, but down below, you kind of don't know what's there, and you don't feel like it's welcoming. So that's as a perspective as a walker and someone who uses the Greenway a lot. But I still would ask you to consider that idea of lop off a story. If you can sacrifice one story, could you put the rest of it around and still maintain, with setbacks and things, as Craig said, and still maintain that feeling of, variegation, because this could be a great project and we need it. We really do. And I appreciate, Mr. Benner, that you're taking it on, because this is a place that's really going to matter in that block. And I'm really heartened to hear you say how neat you think the block is, because I think that's the way most of us who live and spend time on the South Side feel about it. So my contribution is for what it's worth. And I know that you don't have to believe me when I say this, but I've been working with a lot of people, and we've been examining this, and there is a big movement afoot to try and keep examining all these proposals as they come in front of you. There's a blog that does an analysis and provides data and some additional information and research. So we're looking at this critically because we love the South Side, not because we want to stand in your way, not because we want to stop development, but because we want development. And we want it to be something that everybody can live with and that supports the historic fabric and is livable. So thanks for trying, and thanks for keeping working on this, because I think it could be really valuable. Thanks.
Thank you. To your point, one of the important components of this is the location of the Greenway. And while you don't see access points directly on that elevation coming to the Greenway. This building is designed or will be designed so that it contributes and wants to invite those occupants to use that Greenway, because that's the value. I've been before this board before, as you well all know, and I've been down in the south side, all the rest of it. I've already spent over $20 million on a corner, and I'm not coming to the south side because I don't like it. I think it's going to be a world-class location. And the last thing that I have an interest in doing is somehow screwing it up. And that's why I came up with my first one. I thought when I stood on the top of the parking deck that was up there, and I looked over there going up Vine Street, and I said, you know what, that building will be too high and won't look right. That's why I came back and changed it. Not for some other reason. If we start playing around with increasing the side wings, if you will, and bringing the top down, you're going to get a different character of building. The scale's going to be different. It has to have the air and be able to fly on its own and be on its own and have the air on its own. Just like Antonio said that he wants both of the side buildings to have air around them, and he wants them to be able to breathe. I want this building to be able to breathe too. And when you start squashing these buildings down, they start not breathing. They start look like some big blob somewhere. And that I don't think is what the South Side needs or wants necessarily. And I don't know, you can speak to that also.
No, I actually, to that point, honestly, we drew that. It's a parking. We're doing a lot of things, doing the drawings, and we hadn't fully appreciated it. As I'm sitting here during the day and looking at my iPad, what happened is that the Greenway was like a train track or something. It wasn't made, it was dirty, it was dusty, but now it isn't. And when it was, that's why that building is completely solid. And that building is completely solid. But now I think you almost have to take the thing and take the sock inside out or whatever you call it. So I do think that if you live there, you don't want to have to go around the block to go to the Greenway. So I think a connection on there and a more gracious kind of stepping for residents to come down from there or for something would be a good thing to do. And to keep the massaging the balloon of finding ways of carving some balconies without losing the apartments that are going to make this possible. So I do think that we can tweak the balloon a little bit at a finer scale. I do think that the comment that the lady mentioned about thinking more about that wall is important, and it's it's an ongoing thing, and I think we like with the other ones, we commit to going back there and getting more detail than these drawings allow, because then you have to come up to the bigger scale and big materials and all these other things. But I agree.
Excuse me, not to cut you short, but we are running
Right.
late on time. We have another speaker.
Yeah,
and
I told I'm long-winded, so I just proved it.
Go to the last slide there.
Right. So all I'm saying is, I think we take the comment well.
So I just felt compelled. I'm sitting here looking at this last slide, looking at the designs. We've seen a lot of projects come through the city. I have to be honest, I'm not always as appreciative of modern design as some other folks in this room. And so with all due respect to Antonio's projects that have been presented earlier tonight, it's not that I don't like those, but I'm sitting here looking at this photo, admiring the intersection of modern with this incorporation of the historic elements of the buildings around it. And I'm really struck by how architecturally significant this project is. I don't think we see designs of this caliber on the South Side every meeting, right? And so I just felt compelled, and I don't always weigh in on designs for you folks, but I just felt compelled sitting here to stress what I think is the importance of consideration of a project that decades from now, long after we're all gone, that the folks who are going to be entertaining historic district considerations, we'll be looking to this structure. We'll be looking to this building to measure against for future development. And so, I ask you to give this serious consideration to support this project. I think it is an excellent project. I know there's always concerns around, height. This is a game changer for this block. We all know how underutilized it's been for so long. And I just ask you to consider supporting this project tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. Other comments?
There's the penthouse suite and everything's not on the top, right, for this project? The penthouse, the mechanical penthouse suite or anything like that is not located, and it wouldn't add any extra height.
Oh, this will probably be rooftop units that are low, so they wouldn't be seen. They're like the individual sort of air handlers that they're usually put in the middle of it, so you don't see,
Okay.
and you don't have overrides. You're not gonna get a penthouse box up there.
Okay.
Okay, do we have a motion from anyone regarding this application?
I'll move
Roger?
that we approve this. It'll add greatly to the south side. The only thing that concerns me, and this doesn't have to do with this project, but the Bethlehem Steel main office is still empty. Other projects are already springing up on 3rd Street for more housing units. Who's going to rent all these apartments and how expensive are they going to be? I don't know. But I like this project and I move that we accept it and allow it to go forward.
Do we have a second?
Is that going to include the demolition of the Boys and Girls Club too?
Yes.
I'm asking, does the motion include the demolition of the Boys and, does the motion include the demolition of the Boys and Girls Club?
The motion is to approve.
Oh, okay.
Approve
Okay.
this.
The
Yeah.
entire project.
Okay.
I'll second it.
Right.
Recommendation, yeah.
I would just, Roger, I would just like to make sure you reference this cheat sheet in terms of making a motion.
Oh, okay. I would like to make a motion for the city council to issue a certificate of appropriateness for the proposal work on the old boys club property. That's all right. Could you?
That would be consistent with our guidelines
Yeah, yeah.
and the Secretary of Interior standards. And Mr. Patrick,
I
second.
I second it.
Any further discussion?
I'm sorry, just for clarity, your motion does include the demolition of the boys' club.
It does.
Yes.
Thank you.
Any further discussion? Call the vote. Mr. Patrick,
Aye.
Simonson,
Aye. I'm recusing.
Mr. Lausch.
Aye.
Mr. Hudak.
Aye.
Mr. Cornish.
Nay.
I vote aye. Okay.
Thank you. Now, you guys come back.
Yeah, come
Oh,
back
yeah.
with the design stuff.
Okay, I think just real quickly to wrap up the meeting for our commission, I think Jeffrey probably needs a motion to approve minutes from the last meeting.
So moved.
So moved.
Second.
Okay.
And I just had one thing. Before, you were gonna close it out quick, because I just have one thing, is that I did send that email to everybody with the design, with the changes for the ordinance and a couple other things, so if you can get a chance to look at it, read through it, if you have any questions or, recommendations or anything, just shoot me an email.
Yeah, and I think in addition to that, if I could just, there are a couple of other items that came up. We had one visitor from the public tonight who wrote to me, and she was, I think she was asking about a couple of things related to allowing more public input, and maybe this should both be for Alicia and Darlene to hear, but I guess it sounds like there's maybe some impediments for people from the public to be able to come here. One of them, of course, is I think there's still a lot of people out there who are concerned, even when we're all masked up, about coming to a public meeting right now. And her suggestion was that we continue to allow people to, be online and make comments publicly on, I guess Zoom meeting is the platform or whatever we were using. So that's one thing she was suggesting. The other thing she was suggesting was that, we used to be at the Banana Factory, and in some ways I could kind of sympathize with this, that if we're reviewing items for the South Side and West Bethlehem, I thought it made sense to be on the South Side, but this is something to talk about for further discussion, and I just wanted to bring it up while it's on my mind.
If I could just say, it is
Sure.
much easier for us to live stream meetings from this room.
Okay.
All the technology exists here, and we too received that same
Okay.
expression of concern, and it's been forwarded to the folks in the position of making the decisions around virtual meetings.
Yeah, I think it certainly makes sense if, as long as we are still masking and there's still concerns for people, with COVID and all that. So I'm glad to hear that it's being listened to. The only other thing I would like to again remind all of us here is, I fell a little short tonight too. I think we all got to just remember that when we make a motion, it's not a motion based on what we like. We're making a motion specifically related to our guidelines and Secretary of Interior standards. And again, we also have to, back it up by what we would like to see if we happen to deny something. We got to give very clear reasons for that. So, that's why I tried to form a cheat sheet for us to use. And in fact, I found myself hunting for it too. So that's the only other thing I wanted to offer out there. And anybody else have anything they want to add? If not, I'll say goodnight. Motion to adjourn.
Have a good Thanksgiving, everybody.
Everybody enjoy their holiday. See you soon.
Oh, yeah.